Starting officially. Welcome, brothers. Welcome to this round table discussion. My name is Ati Mqubelo, for those who will be listening. This is hosted by One Day Biblical Conference, working with Heritage Baptist Church. Just a background on why we're doing this before we come to the brothers who will be assisting us with introductions and all of that. Last year, we had a conference and we're dealing with honoring parents, we're dealing with family, and it is in that conference, but even before the conference itself, the reason why we chose the topic we chose for the conference was because we're seeing some trends even with some of our attendees, which are basically young adults, as they seek to get married, that there's been this conflict when it comes to just families, especially coming from families which are not Christian and not believers. It became clear to us that there is some discrepancies in terms of understanding honoring parents, how far that goes and all of that. So in that discussion, I think it also then just unfolded in our Q&A. I think it was after Lelo also preached a wonderful sermon on just honoring our parents. Then in the Q&A, it became clear that we are not on the same page in some of these things, and we've assumed we are. And I think there was some small shocks to the brothers in seeing that what you've actually understood is not exactly what the other person has understood. So it was regard to just honoring parents, particularly in marriage. So it then provoked a discussion because of the questions that came after. I even had a brother, a pastor who phoned, who was there, who said, we need a discussion. We need a discussion. And because our conclusion there was that at least we know now that there needs to be a discussion. There needs to be a discussion. And then there was then this call for, at least call some of the pastors we know, faithful brothers, just to come and explore this. So that's where the background is coming from. And a few disclaimers as well. This is not a debate. It's not a debate, so we want to explore these ideas. So we'll have questions, we'll have follow-up. I'll just be facilitating the discussion. You brothers can even ask one another just to get some clarity. What do you mean? But it's not a debate. Secondly, I know with our current ways, especially with social media, this is not those moments of gotcha moment where you want to be the one who, I've got you here. This is not that type of discussion. Our discussion is to build, is to explore, is to help our churches to understand these things better, is to iron, as it were, sharpen our understanding of these issues, helping one another, because whether we like it or not, our young people are going to get married and are going to face these issues and this question of marriage and institutions that can administer, authorize, or approve marriage. It's relevant to our country, particularly in South Africa, and hence we then called for this discussion. And the other disclaimer, even this discussion may not be conclusive. We want to explore the ideas, we want to iron things up, to ask questions. Why do you believe what you believe? This will be helpful to our people. We'll send it to the group, and people will get to listen to it as well. So if then there's more need, we may even have a second part to the discussion later on in the year or next year. But yeah, that's the idea. It's a discussion. I'll be facilitating. I'll throw some questions. We'll allow each and every one of you brothers to express yourself fully. We do have enough time. We won't be cutting you off. This is not that type of discussion. But there is room for clarity if you want to understand. You brothers can throw questions amongst each other as well. If tensions do rise, which I don't expect that they will, I will intervene. At times I might even call for a break because, again, the goal for us at least, we want these issues to be explored, especially in our context, in our South African context. We want these issues to be explored. Another point to mention, just in logistics, we have another brother, Sihle Xulu, who will be joining us soon. But yeah, that's our background. That's the background. We'll give the pastors just to introduce yourself as well. Just name, surname, the church you are ministering in, even the area, just geographical area. This usually helps our people who come to our conferences, especially when they are looking for sound churches. It does help them. But yeah, if we can do that, we have the mic. We'll start with our host, Pastor Lelo.
Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity to be here with these distinguished men. My name is Mpumelelo Waguneni Sibongo. I pastor Heritage Baptist Church here in Melville, a congregation that has a lot of young people. So we have a lot of skin in the game when it comes to this, because we are having weddings almost every wedding, not almost every wedding season. Every wedding season we're having weddings. So it's an important conversation for us.
My name is Chris Mnguni, pastoring Grace Baptist Church in Davidton in the East Rand area. I'm pastoring a church in a township area. We also have a young congregation. We deal a lot with lobola issues and assisting the young people as they get married.
Cool, thanks, man. I'm Alan Lester, one of the pastors, counseling pastor at Living Hope Church in Sunnyside, Arcadia, Hatfield area. Founding member of that church, and church has been blessed with a lot of multicultural interaction, and been there a long time and enjoying good ministry there.
And I'm Mike Brunk. I'm the pastor of Katoris Bible Church in the Katlahong Township area. We're just outside of Phosphorus. We also have a very young church. We've had 3 weddings in the last 3 months, and we've got another one planned for May. So definitely a pertinent information.
Thank you, brothers. And I will give again room for our sound team. You can interject at any time if you feel there's issues with just the recording. And just also to put this out there, I know most podcasts don't do it. We will give opportunity to edit this, so we are free to discuss. It's not directly live. So brothers, there is going to be that opportunity, because again, we're not for internet trolling and all of those things. We just want to build up the body of Christ. So, yeah. With that said, let me read just 2 passages to open up our discussions, and I will pray for us. In Matthew 19, verse 6, Jesus gives this powerful, fundamental, and foundational principle of marriage. In Matthew 19, verse 6, it says, "So they are no longer 2, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let not man separate." What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate. It is also in Hebrews 13. I will read again in verse 4. It says, "Let marriage be held in honor among all, and let the marriage bed be undefiled, for God will judge the sexually immoral and adulterous." Let me pray for us. Oh, Heavenly Father, what a gracious gift you've given humanity. Oh Lord, this companionship, this covenant relationship of marriage, Lord. What a blessing you've given us, Lord. And we praise you for it, Lord. But we also understand, because of sin, oh, this has been muddied up. Oh, so much strife and conflict arises because of this. And as your church, Lord, we seek to have godly marriages. We seek to have godly marriages, Christ-centered marriages. But before we even get there, Lord, we also seek to understand what is marriage, Lord. Especially as we shepherd people, our people, Lord, help us, give us the wisdom, and give these brothers, Lord, the wisdom, the gentleness, the sensibility, the faithfulness to Scripture as we consider this issue, Lord, of who can administer marriage, Lord, what institution, Lord. We realize the implications of these things, Lord, that are far and wide to our people. And therefore, we ask for your blessing even for this discussion, Lord, that, oh, Father, you may give us the wisdom to explore this faithfully and to honor you, to honor your Son, Jesus Christ, even in these discussions. In his name do we pray, amen. Amen. So, yeah, just last few points from my side before we get into it. if there is point of clarity, I will just interject just to ask you to expand and just explain that further. And you also can do the same with some of the questions if they are not clear. I will not be moving with any particular order as such, but I would like most of you to express yourself in some of the particular questions there, especially one of them regarding what institution can approve or administer marriage. Just as well as to explain, when I say administer marriage, I mean the institution that can approve that this is marriage, can approve. I don't mean institute marriage as in bring the idea, establish the idea of marriage. I'm taking that as an assumption for all of us that God is the one who has already instituted marriage in the Garden of Eden in Genesis. So we're talking about now institution that God would approve marriage, to say this couple is married. That's the idea we are talking about. God is the one who instituted marriage, is the one who started it. I'll take that, it goes for assumption. If I'm incorrect, brothers, you can always just raise. If you have, we have to open these opportunities up and not assume. But I'm assuming that's the case with all of us. God instituted marriage. So with that said, brothers, perhaps maybe to start from just a basic understanding, how would each of you define marriage? And if you have any scriptural references as well, that would be helpful, even if you don't go specific to them, but that come to your mind, just biblical principle that guide that definition. How would you define marriage? The mic is there.
The mic is by Mike.
The mic is by Mike.
I would look at marriage, and as I thought about this question, I looked at Matthew 19, where you just read from in Jesus' definition, plus Malachi 2:14, and I would look at the relationship of marriage as a covenanted relationship between a man and a woman, which would be consummated by the sexual act. So marriage, again, for the most part, would be till death, to death us do part. But the Malachi passage is the wife by covenant is stated. So there has to be a swearing, there has to be a vowing to take this man or this woman to be my lawfully wedded spouse.
Yeah, like that covenant of relationship. I think, as Jay Adams puts it, a covenant of companionship. I would go with, no suitable helper was found for Adam, so God creates a helper for him. So I would say, I believe Scripture is teaching that marriage is a covenant of companionship, and it's established between a man and a woman with God as witness. It's a lifelong relationship, and it ends up constituting a man and a woman as one flesh for a faithful relationship that resembles the relationship of Christ and His church.
Yeah, I will agree with these brothers that marriage is what God says in Genesis 2:24. It's not good for a man to be alone. I'll give him a helper suitable for him. So it's between a man and a woman. It is definitely, there's a covenant between a man and a woman. There is witnesses in that covenant that it was struck between that man and the woman.
Yeah, nothing much to add other than, I think the Genesis 2:24, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. So just say recognizable by the family, recognizable leaving and cleaving between, so leaving family to create a new unit, which is this one flesh.
Thank you, brothers. Now, this second question, I think, is going to be the foundation on top of what you've just answered for the rest of our discussion, because that's the crack of our discussion. I would like to give just this clarity before I ask it. When we're asking institutions that can approve, sanction, officialize marriage, I'm not asking that can approve godly marriages. I'm asking that can approve marriage. That I need to draw that line. I'm not talking about godly marriages, holy marriages, loving marriages, happy marriages. I'm not putting an adjective to it to say these type of marriages. I'm just talking at a definitional level. It would be marriage or it would not be marriage. I hope we can clear that up, because sometimes it gets muddied. I saw in our Q&A last that some people are actually arguing for godly marriages, whereas a marriage can be a marriage even if it's a disobedient marriage or ungodly marriage and all of that. So I'm just asking from a definitional level that would that be marriage as well? Would it be fair, brothers, that all of us believe that unbelievers can get married as well?
I hope so.
Yeah. I have to ask that because I did once speak with a brother a few years back who was adamant that God would not recognize the marriage of unbelievers until they came to a Christian whatnot. So I have to clear that up, that in this room or in this table we believe unbelievers can get married. So that's where my point is definitional. I'm not talking about godly, God-pleasing, honoring marriage, just definitional. Are we clear there? That's our discussion. So it's another discussion to say what then can make a godly marriage. Just to clear that up. I will allow Sihle as well to join us, because this is the foundational question for the rest of our discussion. So my question is, let's give just Sihle. Not at worry, brother, we've informed them. So welcome. Maybe even before I ask, you can just quick intro for you, Sihle. Just name, surname, church, and the area where you are pastoring in with the mic.
Well, good morning, brothers. Good morning, everybody. My name is Sihle Xulu. I have a privilege of leading a church in Edenvale called Renewal Fellowship. Yeah, we've been there for 5 years, and by God's grace, we keep going. Amen.
Thank you, Sihle. So, brothers, what institutions, if any, has God in His Word delegated to administer, perhaps as a parenthesis, to sanction, to approve, to authorize, to officialize marriage? That God has delegated the right, the authority, that these institution or this institution can recognize marriage, approve marriage. Again, I'll keep clarifying, because these things matter for me, just these lines. I'm not talking that institute marriage, that come with the idea of marriage. That God has done that, but He has delegated, if any, institution to approve then what He has instituted. Just as a further clarity, marriage is that God in His Word is against. The assumption again is that no institution can undo that or can do the opposite, can make a marriage valid that God has said it's not valid. Because in all of your definition, you use men and women, for example, assumption is the opposite is just not marriage at all, and there's no institution that can override God in that. Would that be fair to all of you, brothers? Yeah, just as a basis. So, brothers, what institutions, if any, that God has delegated to recognize, approve, sanction marriage?
So I take
just a quick one. It seems like in your guys' mic, you guys are speaking with the congregational voice. Let's speak with the preacher voice.
How? How? I thought we were talking. This is a good question to begin with, Bafo, because there were battles in the Reformation over this particular question, and so there were battle lines drawn when you go into the history of this in the church after the Reformation. I take Genesis 2:24 to be instructive and foundational on marriage. So if I look at Genesis 2:24, it is rather straightforward. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. That, for me, that is the institution then, that the mother and the father are the ones who recognize primarily that a marriage has happened. I take that further with the Ten Commandments, that you shall honor your father and mother. That's the primary commandment. That's the first thing in the second tablet. Honor your father and mother, and it's inconceivable that honoring your father and mother wasn't. When thinking about honoring your father and mother, the marriage aspect wasn't involved. In fact, throughout the Old Testament, all you're seeing is people honoring their father and mother in that case. I fall with Martin Luther when he sees it as it says, because of this assumption. Martin Luther argues, because of this assumption that even unbelievers get married, then of the three institutions that we all recognize, generally Reformed people at least, that there's the family, there's the church, and then there's the state. Because unbelievers' marriages are also right and legal before the Lord and recognized as marriages actually, then then the church cannot be the one, which was the main battle. That was the main battle in the 15th century, because in the 12th century, the Aquinas and in the 12th century, the Roman Catholic Church had effectively sacramentalized marriage, and the Reformers were saying, no, you can't do that. So because of that, then I immediately that seems to make sense to me, taking the scripture and just the rest of the information in the Old Testament, and certainly the speaking of the New Testament. There's nothing that seems to, when Paul writes to Timothy, he doesn't tell him how to do a wedding. There's never any instruction around that, even in the sub-apostolic group. This was only an issue because of the 12th century stuff in the Roman Catholic Church. So because of that, then I take it as it has to be the civil side of institutions that are the ones that are delegated to, because even unbelievers, and there isn't any clear instruction in the New Testament. Hey, Timothy, you're preaching, and in your preaching, when you're doing weddings, ensure that this is said, these words are spoken. Without these words spoken, there cannot be any covenant made, or etc. There's nothing like that in the New Testament, nothing even remotely like that. And so because of that, then, to me, of the three institutions, I take out the church. Then it can be a question between the family and the state. And I think the state then has some jurisdiction, because the state has the sword to stop righteousness and unrighteousness. So there could be unrighteous things done in marriage that I think it would be right for the state to get involved in. You understand? Now we're going further into where does the state? Certainly family, but now how far and what way does the state go involved? So that's how I think about it. Genesis 2:24 being foundational.
And I appreciate that, and we'll get to some of those discussions about just the limits, dangers, etc. of these institutions. So I appreciate that.
I think, I would go back, obviously, I don't know how the definition of marriage was, I'm guessing the brothers have expounded on that.
I can give you opportunity,
Yeah.
in fact, to even start there,
Yeah,
because you're
yeah.
not there. Start there.
Yeah.
How would you define marriage?
Yeah.
And then transition to this.
Okay,
Absolutely.
okay. I'll give us sort of a simple definition in terms of I'll say it's an exclusive, lifelong, I'll use public covenant ordained by God, where a man and a woman are united to be one flesh. So I've sort of put different things there, and when I do that, I know sometimes when I do weddings and things like that, I'll use the word sacred, and sometimes people, when I use that, there's a sense of it's a sacred in terms of like it's a church institution, and sometimes I don't use that word, and therefore I did not use that word here, because I would also take the understanding of it's not necessarily those battles were fought. It is not a Christian sacrament. It's not a church sacrament, if I can put it that way. I would put it on the side of a civil I use the word ordinance loosely, civil ordinance, also with regards to the family, again, between those two institutions. So it will not fall on the church. Now again, there are pros and cons in all of these things as we think about them, and probably we'll get into them. But just on the basis, I would put that on the civil, and also and from under that to the family. Yeah.
I will again agree with these brothers in looking the family as the institution that we see from the Old Testament going to the New Testament, playing a vital role on the issues of marriage. Beginning in Genesis, in the Garden of Eden, you go in Genesis 24 with Isaac, Rebecca. Now you ask a question, going to the New Testament, where are the principles that God seemed to give the families the authority over their children. Then our brother has mentioned some of the verses. You go to Ephesians 6, the children obeying their parents, but then you say, it's talking about the children here, there. So how do we then cross now to the issue of now fathers giving their daughters to marriage? Then Paul addressed that issue in 1 Corinthians 7, when now he deals with the issues of marriage, dealing with those who are married, single, and so on. Now in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, in verse 38, that's where I think is explicit on what he says there. He says, let's speak from 37. But he who stands firm in his heart, being under no compulsion, but has authority over his own will, and has decided this in his own heart, to keep his own virgin daughter, he will do well. Verse 38. So then, both he who gives his own virgin daughter in marriage does well, and he who does not give her in marriage will do better, of which we can deal with that aspect of those who don't want. But what Paul seemed to do in that particular passage, he gave that responsibility to the families. He's not bringing it to the church. He's not talking about the church who wants them to get married and the church who doesn't want them to get married. He did not do that. So then that's why we will acknowledge the families and the father, and we understand our context, who is having an authority in that house, in that family. That the Bible seems to be, at least that principle seems to be clear there for me.
All right, now the cat is among the pigeons, eh? So I agree with what Lelo says, that Genesis 2:24 is foundational, and I would like to bring some clarity by separating two different things that should be separated, and what we've been speaking about. And the first is, you've got a man, a woman, and God. God is the witness in the garden. And so that marriage happens without any human witness, and God is the witness. So foundational is that. And then, so that's the primary, that's the core of marriage. When I understand the moment of marriage, I understand the moment of marriage is when a man says to a woman, I'm going to be joined to you in this particular way for the rest of my life, for your life. And when she says the same, when those two enter in before God, this question has to do with your question later on. What if two, go off somewhere and get married by themselves before God? Is that valid? I don't want to spoil all the secrets for now. But the point is that that's the primary, that's the core. I don't know if Lelo is willing to go that far, but I think that's the core. That's the essence of marriage, is a man, woman before God in a covenant. But then secondarily, in our age, you have the church. You've got, the cultural community, and you've got the state. And even in all of those, like for example, the state, when you have somebody who's representing this union coming together legally, They state after the union has already been made. They say, by the authority vested in me by the state, I can't remember, I'm not a marriage officer, I don't know the words, but it's a legal proclamation. That does not constitute the marriage. It's a legal proclamation that something has already happened. This couple has entered into a covenant of companionship before my eyes, so I'm now giving them the legal status of married people. So I separate those. And even if you go into a court of law for a divorce, I don't know if any of you have had the misfortune of being in court for a divorce. It struck me, a few months ago I was there, and the magistrate says, is there any way that this relationship can be restored? And the person says no. And based on the fact that this relationship between the couple cannot be restored, the magistrate says, I now dissolve this marriage. So even the legal proclamation comes after the agreement between the couple, and then for divorce, the legal statement comes after the destruction of the relationship between the two. So I would go as far as to say, yes, I totally agree that the Bible does have, we'll talk about that later, I'm sure, does have principles. You should honor your mother and father. You should love your friends. I mean, imagine a guy comes and takes my daughter and marries her in some back room secretly before God. I would consider them married. They should obey the law and go and register that marriage. But that would damage our relationship for the rest of our lives. Hey? Yeah. Anyway, without spilling the beans on the other questions, that's where I would stand on that. So no authority has the right to proclaim them man and wife. That happens before God. Other authorities are secondary but necessary.
We allow follow-up. You can quickly, for clarity's sake. Yeah, interact for
You
clarity.
invoked my name
Yeah,
three times. You said boogeyman in the mirror, so the boogeyman is here.
And bring it close, Lelo, for my
Yes.
people.
Yes, brother. I think just to maybe, I don't know if now this is going into the next questions, or so you forgive me. Just
No, I will not allow it to go to the next. I can allow it for clarity if you want some clarity there, because he did touch on, but I still want to get
Okay.
Pastor Mike involved, and then we'll get to some follow-ups.
Okay. Well,
Only for clarity for now.
okay. I guess then for clarity, you would understand, just to understand, brother, you would understand Genesis 2:24 to not include. You would understand just to make sure that I'm understanding you. You'd understand that there was in Genesis 2, unstated somewhere, there was an actual verbal communication between the man and the woman that says that they are saying some words between the two of them, effectively saying that I'm yours, and etc. Which I'm assuming maybe you might be thinking of where Adam starts singing poetry. And you would then view that as the moment of entering marriage, and the leaving part is not foundational to the marriage itself. It's not definitional, and it's not the institution by which that entering into marriage must be controlled by. You are viewing just the two of them saying those words as the institution, effectively, that enters into the marriage, and not any other institution outside of them.
Maybe to further clarify, I think what Lelo is also asking is, so even if they never left to cleave, they would already be married because of just that verbal covenant that they made with each other before the witness of God.
Yeah, so I don't think we can make the text say that they exchanged marriage vows. And even in the secondary principles for the church, the Bible doesn't require us to say marriage vows. But I do take the view that if a couple enters into a covenant of companionship, and each of them has a different definition of what that means, there's going to be trouble for the rest of their lives. So I do say that even though the Bible doesn't require marriage vows, it does require an understanding of what the covenant is. If in order to sign a contract, you need to read the words of the contract and say, yes, I agree. So I don't believe they, without any evidence in the text, I don't believe God required them to recite marriage vows. And they didn't have to leave their mother and father because they were no mother and father. Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question. Yeah.
Maybe to further clarify, because if I'm understanding you well, definitionally, a marriage is a marriage between two consenting people before God as witness, regardless of the other institutions, because they are secondary. The marriage would be there. Now, if you talk of honoring parents, you are talking in terms of relationally. It would be good for your relationship with the parents if you included them, but it's not necessary for definition, for just this is a marriage. So, in a sense, two people before God, without parents, without the church, and without the state, can be married. Definitional. Not a good marriage, happy marriage, stressful marriage, conflict-ridden marriage. Those adjectives put aside, they would be married.
Yeah, so what we actually in that other question now, you know, two people going to get married secretly. So I would say that definitionally, that couple would be married, but what they would be doing is wrong. You know, it would be hypothetical and wrong for them to go and get married because they are sinning against their community. No one lives in a vacuum. It's a huge insult to a father to take his daughter and marry him secretly, you know, and cut him out of that. And to a mother, you know, it's an insult to, in fact, what Lelo, I'm going to use his name again, was pointing out, if, you know, Ephesians 6, was he? I don't know, whoever it was. If Ephesians 6, you know, speaking about the foundational command, and it comes with a promise, so that you may live long in the land, you know, and it has to do with the fact that you get married, you honor your parents for the future. And how much more so is it for you to honor your parents in marriage? Because otherwise, if you diss your parents in marriage, there's trouble for the rest of your life, for your mom-in-law, I mean, everybody. Yeah, anyway, so I say that, yes, it's definitional, but it would be wrong to do that. Okay. So I'll go that far, yeah.
I appreciate that, because I will keep I want lines to be drawn, especially for people who will be listening to this later, because you are not advocating that do away with these institutions, don't honor. You are saying, but at a definitional level. I want people who are listening to understand that, because people can misunderstand and say, okay, you are saying these don't matter, they should not be included. But we are talking definitionally. We are not talking happy, godly, all of those adjectives. So I need to keep repeating this for people who are listening so that they don't misunderstand and take things out of context. I appreciate that, brother.
So first of all, I just want to say I really appreciate what you guys have said. You've thought about this a lot, and I appreciate the input that you've got. I've learned some things here as I've been listening. I took the question maybe a little bit of a different angle, and the way I would answer it is that I think the institution that God has given us is human government, and I'm using that in a broad sense, because human government includes the family, human government includes the church, human government includes the state. And again, to the point that somebody made, I don't want to mention names because then I'll have to give them a rebuttal. I don't remember who said it, but just that idea that the civil authority has the right to legalize the institution. And I think you see that in Romans 13, where government is given to regulate life in this world. And so even where the church and family are involved in the marriage and so forth, it's still basically in a subservient position to the state. I'm like you, I can't marry somebody here legally because I don't have the certificate to do so. So I rely on the civil government to give me the authority to recognize a couple or to bring it about. And the same with the family. The family can't just have their own way of it has to be recognized by the state as far as I understand it, and that's a little bit out of my league. But as I understand it, even the paying a lobola and those kinds of things has to be recognized by the government, the civil government, in order to be a legal marriage.
Thank you, Pastor Mike. Just a quick follow-up there to clarity. In my mind, I do picture a state where that can have family involvement, but I also can picture a state where there is no family involvement. The families are not, because the state is almost like a unionizing the community voice. And sometimes, like dictatorship, for example, they don't necessarily involve the family and all of that. So I can picture a scenario where an individual family unit has a very different approach to the state as the centralized idea of these families. So in your definition, you would say the state is the one, not that individual family unit that sort of approves sanctions and administers marriage.
I think what I'm trying to say is the state is the only one that is legally able to recognize the marriage, okay? And so whether the state grants the right to the church or legislates how the family recognizes a marriage, that would be my understanding of the situation.
Yeah, I was thinking Pastor Mike would, explain further unless the state has changed, and our brother here may help us, because even with those two people, the state still wants witnesses to come. Those have helped to go there. There will be two witnesses. So the state doesn't pay attention. I'm not sure whether they want you to be related to those witnesses. They don't pay attention to that. As long as there's two witnesses. So that means even the state does not only say, oh, because two of you have showed up, then all is well. They still want wants witnesses in that. So again, from Pastor Mike, you seem to, you take the state and then you leave that, the authority of the families in that is not part of this particular, just in understanding, I'm trying to make a follow-up that I'm clear on that.
So I think they work together, okay? And the same with the church. The church has rights within the legislation underneath of the civil government. We can, in our own church, I won't marry somebody unless one of them is a member of the church. Okay, I'm exercising authority as a pastor, but under the auspices of the state government. That's what I'm trying to say. So I think they cooperate, they work together.
Because we're speaking definitionally, it would be good that they work together relationally, but definitionally, do they need to work together? In the sense that the state may approve marriage without the family. Would in our country, would that be fair, a statement? And in such cases, that definitionally would still be marriage. Okay. So families can cooperate, church can cooperate, but not necessarily so. The state is the overhead. If I'm getting you correct. It's just understanding for now, for clarity, so that before we proceed.
Just also try to understand the idea that the state is not recognizing the what is called cultural marriages. Because what is the state doing? The state is regulating the marriages. That is why it looks to a community, like when we deal with the cultural, it looks to the community and say, okay, how were the people getting married in this community? What is considered by the community as a marriage? Then the state is regulating, because the state responsibility is to protect its citizens. So it's regulating in a way when issues of divorce comes and when this marriage is dissolved. How is it then that the parties are not abused in this? So he's coming to regulate, but he's not coming to the community and say, okay, this is what customary you are saying. No, we say no to that. No. It's still saying customary. A, B, C, D, do you agree with it? Did it happen? Then they say yes. Then the state is making their judgment and say, we acknowledge this marriage. So what I'm trying to say is that you don't see a state standing on the side and say, unless you are married our way, you are not married. No. The state acknowledges the culture, how is it being done in that culture? And according to them, is considering that legal based on those things that it wanted to happen. So I wanted us to clarify those two. Yeah.
I do wonder also, so because the state is like one institution, right? And we're now discussing the state and its imagination, which is fine. But just to clarity, I think we're trying to define from God's perspective, because I imagine states will do things in different ways. So we're now talking about our state, and now I wonder, and that's one. I mean, it's for our people, so we should discuss our state. People need to know this needs to be legal, guys. You can't just, things need to be followed legally, otherwise you're in trouble. But I do think that just for my mind, so I can understand my brothers' positions here, is that we're talking definitionally, and definitionally before God, the question is which institution has the right, which institution is the one that administers this. Has God even delegated this to some institution? And I think what I'm hearing is that we're all viewing human government, to use your broad term, perhaps to different degrees. If I'm correct, my brother Alan has a slightly nuanced view of that, where you're saying that just two people, so not even witnesses, just two people effectively agreeing to get into marriage so it's them before God, then that is a marriage, right? That's what I understand you to say. So that's kind of like the one off ramp. It's still going to the same place, but it's the one. I'm just making sure that I'm clear in my mind. That definitionally, it seems like we have a bit of a point.
Definitionally, you are right about the slight turn from Alan, but with state, maybe to clarify this difference, when it comes to state, brothers, it is an important distinction to make a distinction between the family unit and the state. Because the state can approve marriage without the involvement of the family unit. Now, it's a different discussion when we say what is the state supposed to do when it's doing well, etc. But we're talking now in a definitional level. If a family unit, just a family unit, approves a marriage, before it goes to the state, is that a marriage? Or would it only be marriage when they finally register it with the state? That's a definitional level. If you say it's marriage even before it goes to the state, just because this institution has recognized it, then the state is not the one that recognizes, it's the family. The state just registers, captures what you guys have decided. Yeah, captures what you guys have decided. But if you say that when the family has recognized the marriage, it's still not a marriage until it goes to the state, then it's the state that makes that administration, not the family. Do you get this distinction?
And you're talking
Definitional.
You're talking about ought.
Yes. I'm trying to get away from ought because I know the temptation for most of us, it will be ought, what ought the church to do, what ought the state to do, what ought the family to do. Yes. I'm not talking ought, I'm just talking, is it marriage at that point? So when you talk human government, I'm also cautious there because the church is also human.
So my flag would be on Genesis 2:24, the family being the one that's stated clearly, and then throughout the scriptures we see the family. We see the family being the one who actually has the right in the marriage making. The father gives the daughter, he gives his virgin daughter. The family, I'll see the family being more primary definitionally than the state.
That's important. I'll allow Sihle as well. That's important because this matters for me, the distinction between state and family. Because if the father unilaterally gives the daughter to be married, if the family is primary, as you're saying, it's marriage, definitionally. Now, you would encourage them for good reasons to go and register with the state, but it's marriage already, even at that point. Even if they never registered with the state, it is marriage definitionally. That's what you would say.
Yeah.
Mistake.
Yeah. I do want to, maybe I'm going a bit forward here because I'm thinking of these things now pastorally. I'm back to, I'm back to some of these things that have happened or that are happening, within the congregation and all of those things to say, we've had situations where, again, you involve culture, you involve the church, you involve the state. Those are like, mostly for us, is mostly those three things, interchangeably. And sometimes, the ceremonies or whatever will happen in different times and seasons, all of those things. And I think it's crucial now to say, in definition, which one takes precedent. Because now you would have maybe a family celebration or ceremony that involves some sort of agreement, if I can put it that way, some covenantal language in terms of however the culture uses that. Yeah. And once that is done, that constitutes a marriage. That's what you are saying. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's what you are saying. That's constitutes a marriage. Yeah, I just want to clear that up. It might not have been in within church community and all of that. It's just family and whatever the family did. But then the couple may want church involvement. They want church involvement, and we encourage them to do that. And then the church will involve. Maybe now this is the pastor is coming in to do some ceremony with that. And then after that, it could be the state they want to sign, or the other way around. That sometimes happen differently. And I've always struggled with that. And maybe, I'm putting all of these things at this time. I've always struggled with that to say, where do we recognize that as the church? And to be fair, I've gone with that to say, if Genesis 2 says what it says in terms, and the picture of the family as we see in the Old Testament, even throughout the New Testament, then that should be fine. But also in terms of the church and the before God element, because sometimes that happens, I don't know whether it's still before God, but I will say in terms of, vows that are biblical, all of those things, how do we recognize that? So that's my tension, and that I think maybe the brothers will be helpful with that.
Good. Actually, that's part of the tension I would want to explore. Do you want to say something?
Yeah,
jump in.
Just real quickly, just going with you, because I think that's what we all tend to do, is think pastorally, the situation. So I think you're right. I think I would agree that the family that celebrates the a proper ceremony and both people are involved in it and understand what they're doing and so forth, that constitutes marriage. But what I would do with a young couple in a situation like that is say, let's have a church system or setting of some sort, or go to home affairs or whatever to deal with the appearance of evil, to make sure that everybody agrees that this is actually a constituted marriage. So even though it has been recognized by the family, let's make it a public church setting, so that the brethren are not offended in some way in that situation. Just a thought.
Which is good. I'll give Chris as well. That's good, but I will, as a facilitator, keep drawing the line. That is an ought to do, which is good to do, to make it public. But I'm more focused on, before it goes to the church, is it marriage? When the family has recognized it, before it goes to home affairs, definitional as marriage. Let me even give you some implications of why I will be driving these lines, brothers, of clarity. The implications for us, all of us who believe in the Bible, are serious. Let me show you why, and then I'll give Chris. If we don't believe, if the couple believes they are married because the family has recognized them, the church doesn't believe they are married until they go to the state or come before the church, and that couple sleeps with one another. The church consistently, to be logical and consistent, has to start disciplinary. For that, it has to. If it's consistent to say, we believe marriage definitionally It has to be via the state. No, I want you, if you didn't forget that. Lelo, I want you as well. It's getting hot. I'm just showing the implications of this, brothers. I really want to draw some of these lines definitional. If the church believes you need to come before the church, 1, you need to go to the state, Home Affairs, get a marriage certificate, 2, for it to be married. Before that, it's not marriage. And the couple believes it's the family. And the couple, after the family accepts the lobola, signs them off, does whatever ceremonies you say, and the family says, the father says, I'm good. Go, you guys are married in our eyes. And the couple start to have sexual intercourse. The church, to be consistent, has to institute discipline against that couple until they go to Home Affairs. Because that's fornication by definition. Because they're not married. Definitional. That's why I'm separating the ought to is it marriage? Is it marriage? You would definitely, even before it goes to the state. Can I want the mic? Even before it goes to the state, even comes before the church, the minute the family recognizes them as marriage, they are married.
I would agree with that.
Okay, then that's a slight departure from the state, because the state at that point is not involved. Is not involved. The state, you will need some documents to involve to go and register with the state. The state, of course, obviously can retrospectively recognize that you were married at that date of the lobola. They do that in customary law. They do, yeah. But I'm just saying, at that point, it's just the family that's been involved. And if you recognize that, then it's the family, as you're saying, primary. Let's give Chris, and then Lelo, I want you.
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask you, because you asked us on the institutions, and we're giving you. So I don't know whether you wanted us to agree on the institution. Now let me answer. Because there were some who said it's the state, that they were thinking is the state, right? Then there were some of us who say, no, the family should, then there's a small voice that says it's the church.
Which small voice is that? Which small voice is that? Which small voice is that? Church has been coming in
no, what I'm
odd,
saying
but
is
not
been, in terms of the discussion,
church has been mentioned, Chris, but as far as I can tell from Sihle and even from Pastor Mike,
right,
it's in the odd.
Yes, that's why I'm saying it's small. Yes, because it comes...
No, it's not small, Chris. We have to be clear. It's not small, Chris. The church is not being involved definitionally.
Yes, I'm helping in understanding the weight. I'm saying that the discussions, it seems to be between now the families and the state. Then the question is now, pastorally, how are we coming in as the church? That's what it's been discussed.
That's the ought, which I'm fine with.
Ought.
I'm not
so you are removing it.
Ought, I'm not. Ought, I'll keep refining this. I know.
Yeah.
I'm not asking about what ought to be done.
Ought to be done.
That's
right.
what you pastors can advise your people in your church
Yeah,
in
sure.
terms of what is good. Appearance of evil, it seems it's an ought to be
Right.
done. But I'm talking definitionally.
Yeah,
Is
I just
that
wanted
the
to
case?
conclude.
Whether wrong or right.
Right.
Like if you buy the car, did you buy a car, whether it's a bad car, it's a non-functional car, the engine is bad, it's not good. Did you buy the car? Definitional.
Okay, right.
So I'm talking
Ought
not
not.
ought.
Yeah.
You ought to get a mechanic to check the car before you buy it. You ought to do an inspection. You ought to. I'm just saying, did you buy it?
Right.
Do you own a car? Bad, good, black, red. So odds, I know you brothers will be tempted because you are pastors. After all, you want your, and I know, and I know, also your fear as pastors is that if we explore this definitionally, you are even imagining some people saying, well, if definitional are marriage without that, then I don't need that. And your instincts as pastors say, no, we're not pushing you there. We're just talking at a definitional. So I understand your instinct as pastors, but I do still want to ground this on definitional. I can, at the end, I'll give you some closing statement as well. Bring pastoral advice. Bring what you would want ideally to be done. Bring the secondary institutions as well. But at this point, I'm saying, is it a marriage? Not godly, not was it? So just to emphasize that, yeah.
Okay. I wanted to ask, maybe on your question, if it's not going to come, the institution has been the family, whether we agree or not, is we're going to discuss that, is fine, and the state. Now, my question is, the church, can the church do marriage, help people facilitate marriage without those two institutions? And will that marriage be recognized as a marriage? I'm bringing that as a question.
Let's get the
Because
brothers
we
to
always understand
involve.
it to be three, but now the church, because it's always coming, pastorally the church is coming. So can the church, without a family and the state, and say, on our own, we have authority?
Bring the mic close, Chris. We are recording. Bring the mic close. No, to you. They didn't hear your question. I'm concerned by the people are listening to the recording.
Yeah, my
Ask your
question is, without the family and the state, can the church officiate that wedding and say, we as a church, these two people are married?
Let me intensify that question before Lelo intervenes. I will even put you on the spot, brothers. Hope you are comfortable with that. If some of you officiated weddings, in addition to what is asking, church without those two, were you not in that case misleading, conscious or unconscious, intentional or not intentionally, misleading the people when you even said, most probably now I pronounce you husband and wife after you do the matrimony? Were you not then either acting inconsistently or misleading your people to think that this is also serving to administer the marriage, whereas so far you are saying it's not?
No, I did not.
Start with your initial response,
But now this is more hot now. You're wanting me to distract with. Okay. No, let me say what I wanted to say, and then
please, sorry to
yeah.
distract.
We were talking earlier about this inconsistency, not in, what in the church. What does it look like then? You were posing that question about if the church, if the people get to say a lobola thing happens and then the church has not recognized that yet, they need to be consistent and do discipline if these people. My point on that is the church needs to be discipled. So a church, I think the church is a growing place that can mature with the scriptures. That's the one place where we can mature, I believe, to be more accurate with what the scripture actually teaches. And so then the church can be, I don't think that this is inflexible. The church, until the church sees the people in front of them, then they're not recognizing the wedding. I don't think that our church needs to be discipled. The way we announce lobolas need to change then. We're not in Victorian England. So the way we announce what lobola is and what's happening on Saturday for this couple, the leading up to the lobola, we're leading up to that, we celebrate that, and then when they show up, when we announce our practice here, we announce the day after. Now, the lobola went successful because we've been announcing that the lobola is going to happen. Lobola went successful. They are now Mr. and Mrs. We all clap hands. We move on. I'm just saying that to me, it's not an either or. It's not like these two things are against each other. That's my point. The church needs to see them in a Victorian England type of way or a Presbyterian way, that they need to see them doing things in this particular way, then they can now recognize. I don't think we can mature the church. If we are if I'm saying that definitionally it's the family, then I can move the congregation towards recognizing that, and then the congregation then goes around that. In the same way, if I get arrested, I'm the pastor of the church, I'm one of the pastors of the church. If I get arrested, and then there's an accusation against me, and the government takes me in, and then there's a judgment against me in court, and I'm convicted. I'm not waiting for doesn't need to wait for the church whether or not the church agrees with my conviction or not before I go to prison. I'm going to go to prison because the state has said so. The state is the one who has that authority, and so I'm now a prisoner. I'm now, according to the state, a sinner. in that sense. So whether the church agrees or not is beside the point. Church now needs to be matured. Hey, guys, your pastor, hey, there were problems. So, and then the church needs to recognize that and excommunicate me. Does that make sense?
It does.
So
I appreciate that
that's where I'm coming
sensitivity.
from that part, yeah.
No, I actually appreciate that sensitivity because, yeah, no, you can finish if.
No, I'm saying, as for your big question now,
But I really appreciate that sensitivity, Lelo, because historically in church history, when the church then departed from Rome and broke off from sacraments, one of them would be marriage, and took a different view, they were more on the companionship, mutual consent within the individual, the reformers, but it was definitely not a sacrament. But the church still had, people were there for years in the Catholic Church. So even the reformers, to reform everything, it took time. That's the patience part, and that's the pastoral heart, because my questions are sometimes are provocative, say discipline, and we are bringing the side that, well, it may be that the church is not matured itself to understand as it should at this stage. So there's patience that can come even to the church, so that people who are listening to this audio are not just rushing to their pastor and saying, but you didn't discipline those people, so I'm leaving the church. So I love that pastoral side and that sensitivity that you are bringing, because even with the Reformation, there needed to be that time of just patient, because you've been in the Catholic Church for years, for centuries. After they instituted, they made it to be a sacrament. So to move away from that, there are bad and abusive and dangerous ways that you could do it. And we need to be sensitive of that, especially in the pastoral side. So I appreciate actually that sensitivity. And yeah, so I'll take all of that in context even as I ask you pastors these questions. But let's get Alan involved. Perhaps you have something to add even, but I also have a question that I wanted to ask from your side, because definitionally, it does not need the state or the church or even the family. Which means, my assumption is, with the couple, usually before they start those proceedings with family, they already have agreed with themselves, we want to get married. In that stage, before they even go to lobola, definitionally, they would be married. And if that's the case, have you then practically have had to address a case where you have technically married people who are not living together, who are not giving the conjugal rights to one another, because there's lobola negotiations in progress. There's wedding dates that are going to be planned, and that sometimes takes months. Definitionally, at that point in time where they agreed before God that they are getting married, and now they went to ask for the family's blessing, they came before the church, they went to Home Affairs, there's a time that's moving in between there. Have you definitionally then have to address them to say, brothers, you shouldn't be living away from your wife? While the lobola is happening, you guys are married, and there are conjugal rights that biblically are there for married people. So have you had to confront people and say, no, you guys should be living together even before the family agrees, before government agrees, before you bring it to the church, because primarily God is the witness.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's the fun of living in Africa. Every single wedding's different, you know. None of them are the same. Everything's different. People are different. The whole setup's different. Timing is different, chronology. But to come back to your question, are we not deceiving our church when we say, I pronounce you? I've turned down invitations to officiate at people's weddings for that very reason, until I could settle this issue in my conscience. And now eventually, if somebody says to me, will you perform the wedding ceremony? I say to them, yes, but with this disclaimer, that I cannot say, I now pronounce you man and wife. I sort of err on the other side, and I say, based on the fact that you are now legally married, we celebrate the fact that you've become man and wife. So I'll never say, I pronounce you, I can't do that. So it's obviously a conscience issue. But as far as that other question is concerned, it always happens, when, let me say it doesn't always happen, but it often happens that the first time the church hears about a couple wanting to be married is when they say, we are discussing lobola. And for us in a church, we've said, if you're discussing lobola already, you've come to, we've become aware of this too late. You know, we want couples who are in the church, and of course we're coming into the church setting again, not just universal. We want couples in the church to approach one or more of their elders and say, I'm interested in this guy. And the church must first, it doesn't matter what cultural plot is afoot, the church must first have the authority to say, we believe that this is a biblical marriage or this is not. You know, because the Bible has the final right to say you should be married or you shouldn't. So I want first option. I want them to come to me and I want to say, that's wonderful, man. And I want to walk with them before they get the family involved and then the machinery takes off and the family's negotiating and the couple is mostly left out of that whole process. So I'd like to see premarital counseling start at that point so that they can understand what marriage is. You know, this covenant of companionship, you go through that in detail so they can say, oh, if we commit, this is what we're committing to. And even inside of the premarital counseling process, I know many African couples, their families don't want to know about their prospective husband or wife until it comes to the point where they're absolutely committed, and then they hear about it. They don't want every little fling, you know. So in the process, we say, all right, do you think it's time now that we involved your parents? And we really do our best to have some sort of a face-to-face meeting with the parents, you know, with a counselor, premarital pastor, you know, whoever's doing the counseling, and with a couple, you know, so that we can have a face-to-face relationship, so that we can work together with a family. We're not in competition with the family, but when the family gets involved, we as pastors, we want to be able to celebrate this union. You know, we know that this couple is on board with a biblical Genesis 2:24 covenant of companionship, and that does, just because they agree that that's what the covenant of companionship doesn't mean that they've entered into it. There's still a date in the future. So what we do is we say, agree on a date where everybody knows, the church knows, your family knows, when you are going to begin to live as man and wife. So a person who gets a marriage certificate in a courtroom, you know, or who goes through premarital counseling and they both agree that they're going to commit to themselves in this way, they choose to say, we're going to begin to live as man and wife on this day. And that's the day, you know, maybe it's, you know, with agreement to the family after lobola, you know, sometimes, you know, a wife has got to go and be educated by her mom-in-law for a couple of weeks, or, you know, there are all kinds of strange things that happen. You never hear the end of the differences, you know. So for us, we don't ever have a situation where couples are actually married before God and they're not living as man and wife. We say, all right, on what date is this going to, at what time are you going to say, yes, we have agreed from this date we're going to live as man and wife? And that's important for us. So if that's not happening, then somebody messed up somewhere along the line, and a couple is married and they're not living as a married couple, they're living apart and maybe sinning sexually and getting into pornography and all that, you know. Anyway, I don't know if that answers your question. From
No, it does. It does.
Yeah.
If I'm understanding you well, then it's almost like you as elders are allowing their understanding to sort of prevail, because their understanding is we need to go through parents, because even the date they will send, they will give, will be based on their understanding. Their understanding will be we need to first go through parents, we need to inform the church, then we are married. Whereas it may then mean you are not teaching them this type of understanding that even without your parents, even without the church, definitionally you can actually be married if you guys decide now before God. But I understand from a pastoral side, and let me give another grace as well to my question, because I see I'm being deprived water. Pastor Mike has 3 water bottles. So I think it's these questions that I'm asking. So I'm now being deprived water. There are a few things you've mentioned. So the facilitator is sidelined. But there's a few things you've mentioned that I think I would want to just give grace, because they open up a lot, and Lelo started with that. One of them is conscience. And it gives some context to people who are listening that there's also a conscience issue, even within you brothers, that needs to be considered, even as I ask some of these difficult questions. The second one, there's plurality of elders. You are not just an individual making everything that you ever want to happen in the church happen. So that needs to be taken in context. And thirdly, there's a congregation. Sometimes you serve a congregation and they have this view and you humbly submit to it. So I take all of those as valid sort of reasons sometimes that, well, I wouldn't institute discipline because this is what I believe conscious in my conscience, but does not maybe the view of the rest of the eldership. It may not be the view of the rest of the church, and I humbly submit to it. And I take that. I think that's a norm in our churches, and it's even good and healthy. So even your answers, I'm taking in that light. I'm taking in that context. Even when I ask you why didn't you institute discipline, I take it as a background that there's also a submission that you have towards other elders. There's a conscience. There's a congregation as well. So just to give grace, I appreciate that.
I do want to go back to the sort of the big question of whether, in terms of we have said things that we should have said. Because there are, and again, I mean, Lelo mentioned in terms that sometimes we need to disciple the congregation, but also we need to disciple the couple themselves in terms of what they think, whether they're married or not, all of those things. Because we've had instances where that will not be communicated, and I think Ellen was great to mention that, to say it's good for you, whether the pastors or whatnot. Let's all know when will you recognize that, so that we can take that as well as the church. Because sometimes, you would have couples that say, for our conscience and the way we want to honor God and things like that, as much as we understand that, we will only start living together, all of that, once we've had some sort of ceremony in the church. And I wouldn't want to dishonor that from them. Now, I could be wrong. I mean, you guys will tell me on that. To say I don't want to dishonor them from them. To say if they don't want to live together and all of that until that happens in the church, and then I pronounce that, for them, that's what in their conscience they will go with. Also, you would have instances where it's, we've had a non-Christian couple come into the church, and living together, they become saved, they become sort of Christians, and we like, guys, you can't be doing this. They said, yes, you're right, you can't be doing this. We're now talking to our family and want to be married, and we're marrying them in the church setting, if I can put it that way. As much as there's family involved in that and all of those conversations. But there's a sense of, there's a church element there, and obviously that goes to the States afterwards, or even in between that. But also there's that conscience of the couple itself saying, we want the confirmation of the church and publicly in our church, and from there we will take it from there. So I don't know whether that needs discipleship on their sense, or we would go with that in terms of their conscience. That's yeah.
Yeah, just to answer on maybe on the issues of the conscience. Your conscience can be misled. You can be convinced on something that is wrong. So your conscience cannot be the final standard at the end of the day. So that discipleship we're talking about, that's where it comes in to say, I think part of the problem is why we are sitting here is because the church has been, maybe our church, not the early church, has been ignoring these things and just go with the flow. Now our members are confused because also the pastors are confused. It's not only the members, because the pastors don't know. I mean, they don't know which is which. And then we further confuse the members. Even in counseling, when they come to you, you confuse them further. Then they don't know. And then when they go around our churches, they get further confused now. That actually you and him, you are not agreeing. And that becomes the problem. And the young generation, they're asking a lot of questions on these things. So I think it's very important that, I mean, the discussion is good, that we begin to think on these things. We begin to look at the history and say, okay, did they solve our problem? Even when we talk about the culture, we quick to look back. We are in a culture ourselves. And the culture now is dealing with issues that need us to answer. The next generation will be asking a question. What did they do, these reformers? That they continue, that they were reforming the township, the city. How did they resolve these issues? Because it's not like the reformers throughout the ages, they've solved all our problems. once and for all. Then we need to begin to say, okay, look, what is the provision of the state for the church? That's why the state is saying the pastor must be registered, must have right to officiate a wedding. Okay? Romans 13, obey your leaders. Then you know you don't have a right to officiate. Then you officiate. According to the state, it has made the provision. One of the things our state have made a provision to say if a pastor want to officiate, these are the causes you need to do. You need to know how is it done. We as a state, then we invest that authority to you as a pastor. That can you officiate? Then we are running away because we say, no, tomorrow they'll say I must officiate lesbians. I don't want to do that. So I forfeit that right. I'm like, I don't have. Fair enough, you don't have the right. Then Lelo has the right. When the time for officiating comes, then call Lelo. Call Lelo to come. Who has the right from the state to officiate? If we question that right that is given by the state as a church, we then need to say, how are we regulating our church? Are things in order in the church? Then we need to begin to question then the provision of the state and say, okay, as a church, this is the way we can officiate the wedding, or this is the way we as a church, we want things to be done. We don't want the state to tell us, but we need to engage them. But the way things are, we don't engage the state. There is a provision that is there. We don't also sometimes engage the families, because the families also, they've got their own way. They've put up their way from point A to point Z, for you Z, for us, point A to point Z of how is marriage. The culture knows. I mean, our people knows how is marriage. Guess who doesn't know? The church. The church cannot give you A, B, C, D. Because whatever, when we give this A, B, C, D of marriage, somewhere we say, yeah, you still need to go to the state. Yeah, you still need to go to your families. But the families, they wouldn't need a church. The families will start from point A to point Z and consider these people married with a clear conscience. The community themselves will consider those people following the culture to the T. Married, they will never be confused. Who show up being confused? Sometimes it ended up being the church. The church, they come to the community, they are the only one who seem to be confused, of which they need to give clarity. So that's my...
That's a good point, and I can even add to that, the pastors who are leading the churches are the ones who are also confused then, because the churches do have leaders that God has entrusted. But I want to get Pastor Mike as well involved here, because I still have an accusation to all of you brothers that's still standing, that have you not then, brothers, at least practically, portrayed marriage as a sacrament? Have you not? Because of that wedding day and what you do on that wedding day. Pastor Mike, you said you've had 3 weddings recently, 2 or 3 weddings recently, and I would assume you did the matrimony part. Will you not then portray it as a sacrament to your own people? Not to unbelievers, but to our members. Have we not portrayed it as a sacrament, whether intentional or non-intentional, and thereby misleading that they need definitionally to do that matrimony before they can even recognize themselves as marriage?
If I've misled, it's been unintentional, for certain. What I would say is that when I work with the couples, I do exactly what I said earlier, which is to explain that I would recognize the family, the bowl of payment as being legally binding. But for testimony's sake, I think we should have a church wedding. And that's how I would have dealt with all of those individuals who were involved. So, whether I'm misleading the congregation by not explaining that part of the process or not, I'll give that some thought, because that's an interesting thought. Going back to something you said about pronouncing, if I pronounce you husband and wife, I'm not saying I'm making you. I'm saying I recognize that. So I'm using the word pronouncing a little differently. That's how I would understand it, but that's just a thought.
But even there, with the recognizing, the implication, before you recognize them, were they already husband and wife?
Well, yes. I mean, going to the definitional level that you're going to, yes. I'm not saying that they weren't husband and wife before. I'm recognizing that they are husband and wife.
Yeah, because
Through
the picture,
through the
and I'm not
process.
putting you on the spot, the picture of our wedding events, if you have a picture of our wedding events, if you're sitting there and just watching the event, the implication is that this is the time that this couple is getting married. Even with those, you might now kiss the bride, as if before this time you did not have a right at all, even to kiss your bride. So I'm just saying, with the implication of the perception, and it's not intentional, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I'm just
Yeah.
picking that. Have we adopted that idea of sacramentalism of marriage indirectly and unconsciously to in our weddings, how we do our weddings? Have we imported a culture, a particular culture, in our wedding ceremonies that, in some sense, does not even recognize then the customary? It says start with the customary, but we're not giving you a tick until we do the matrimony. So that's my
So there's a confluence of things here. There's the whole confluence of things, and I think we do need to have a bit of a sharp knife to make sure. So one of the confluence of things is actually, as I'm sitting here, I'm reflecting on all the times I've said that, I've done that. Almost all of them have been when I'm doing the Western members of our congregation. So the people who are not African in our congregation. And their families are sitting there. Their families want this to be done. Does it make sense? So it's part of this is the Western ritual for getting married, coming obviously from the recent history in the past 500, 600 years. But this is the Western way of doing weddings. So if I marry, I'm going to do another Western wedding in a month's time. Their families have agreed, they're happy culturally. The mom and the dad this side, mom and dad this side, the families, they want the wedding to be done, and they want me to say that. So there's a confluence of understanding that some of the stuff has become part of Western culture. Does it make sense? So this is now part of the cultural way of doing a wedding, and so we have to be sensitive to some of those realities. The times where I have had to make an exception or say something to deviate from the Book of Common Prayer's way of doing wedding is when I'm doing Africans, when they want to have the church wedding. And that's when we say that, we're here to celebrate they have been married, because they've been living together. Usually time that they've usually been living together. So I think now you have a more of a deeper question. Even now, so I'm trying to run away from your accusation by saying, well, it's the families wanting me to do this because it's a part of their culture. So I've dodged that bullet. But the bullet I have not dodged is am I pushing the sacramentalism that the reformers, for example, try to run away from? I'm not necessarily sure that we are, because at some point, once you have a culture like the Western culture, as an example, that was by the state made to follow Christian rites, and then they created Christian language for their cultural artifacts, I think then you need to give them the space to be able to say things in a manner that, as long as we make clear that this is not part of our church, this is not me part of like communion, baptism, this is a separate thing. But I think we need to allow a culture that has, whether rightly or wrongly, or however historically, has become Christianized all the way through. You need to allow them to have cultural artifacts that are inherent, that are flavored with Christian, with a Christian motif, as it were. And so, in that sense, Tina, there's kind of like we're dealing with two things. We're dealing with that side of it, but then we're also dealing with the fact that a lot of it, our cultures are just remaining traditional, customary that way. So, and we're trying to make sure that we're balancing these two things well. And I think we have to separate those conversations quite clearly. So maybe some of your accusations are too harsh. I think.
Yeah.
I think because we have to recognize the reality that we're in.
Yeah.
The problem happens definitionally. I read an article from a very popular Christian magazine, an article that said that if your marriage has not been blessed by the pastor at church, you're not married. And I mean, I'm saying Bible, chapter and verse. Yeah. And I think this is where we have an issue. And as long as we've got those things clear, I think, there's a young girl even at our church now who lobolas, everything are happening, and they want to get married when they do the church stuff later, her and her fiance from another church. You were mentioning that point, and you're thinking about it. I just don't see why I would say, let me disciple you out of that. They want to do it. That's how they've thought about it. It's there. I'm not sure. If they have the self-control to wait, or they've agreed that way with the families. They've put that at the table with the families. The families are happy. The families are not feeling infringed upon, which is sometimes what happens when the church comes in and says we're taking over an institution that's not theirs to take over. But if the family is happy, I'm not sure. I'm not. Maybe someone could inform me, brothers. I'm not sure why I'd inform that out of that. Sometimes you're right. So I think there are times you mentioned that sometimes we have to disciple the conscience, and I think so. And I think but this person has heard me speak on this issue, and this is where they still want to be. Are they being obstinate, or are they just desiring to do things in a way that they see is closes the picture, it closes the rule, it closes the entire thing. Like it for them, we've done it, with the family, we've done it before God. Now we're feeling free. We can just continue with our lives. I don't see why I'd get involved in that. You know what I mean? So that's kind of where I land on your accusations.
Which is good. I definitely grant even the consistency of saying, well, if Western culture, this family unit decides this is our approach, then it's still consistent with the family recognizing it. Is their family is just saying we would recognize it in this way in terms of the Western culture. Grant you that, and I appreciate that. But I then come to the African culture and have to ask you, have you not then had an African couple that did vows on that celebration? Because you spoke of it as a celebration if it's Africans, it's usually a celebration. Did they not do vows? And for my understanding, the content of those vows, it implies, at least to my listening ears and as I'm watching them, that they are committing now to get married. I take you to be my lawfully wedded wife or husband. So the implication or the picture that's sent with this celebration, it does not seem like it's a celebration of something that has happened. It seems like it's happening now. So that accusation for me still stands a little bit to say, even when you do that celebration, the actual actions that are happening there send a picture to someone who's just observing that this is happening now. Yes, all the other steps have been done, but the marriage itself is only happening now, because even the couple themselves, what they say with their mouths is, it's not, I've taken you, we're celebrating what? I've taken you 3 months ago to be my lawful wedded wife, so this is why we're celebrating.
You brought us here to attack us.
No.
Is that, like, did you bring us here?
Sorry, brothers. And I would confess, even for some of these weddings Pastor Mike is talking about, 2 of them were in my church. So I'm as guilty as you are. So but I'm just speaking on behalf of people who are listening, and I'm really sharpening the definitional aspect of it, so that it may not change even today, brothers, but at least it sparks a conversation within our churches to bring clarity, even because I really am persuaded that most of our people in our churches believe that you do need the church. Definitionally. They are persuaded on that, most of our young people. And I'm saying that has been driven partly by what we've done. That because we've allowed them to go through the lobola. We've even informed the church that this person has went for the lobola, but we'd never recognize it even then, unless the couple said so. But usually the couple have said, our wedding date is now. We've agreed with the families after they took lobola. It's going to be in 3 months' time. Even us in our announcement in the church, we've left them as engaged people until that day where we say we pronounce you husband and wife. So I'm saying this is relevant to our young people because the understanding that I'm hearing in this room is not the understanding that I think they do have of the role of church. So that comment you had, I had it as well, where someone, a pastor now, not just some, a pastor was adamant, no marriage until it's brought to the church. No marriage, definitional. Didn't even recognize unbelievers' marriage. So it is relevant and it is affecting, and you're talking about the church needs to understand itself. So this is the basis. I'm not just attacking you personally, brothers. Please, I'm not, because I'm involved in that as well. I'm not speaking from a higher ground. But I do want, this discussion is important, and I'm not gonna flatter you guys. We want to deal with it. We want to start thinking about it. It may even be the next generation that starts to implement practically some of the principles we're speaking about because of just the years of what has been. We are reformed and reforming. So I'm focused now on the reforming part.
Right. Yeah, I mean, what you are saying is important because some of us, we even got married like that. Because you follow those steps, you find them there, and you do everything culturally, lobola and so on, then you do that celebration. You ended up 3 times. There's 2 celebrations, the Western and the cultural. And there is that belief, if these things are not done, you are not, it's not done. You believe that, and it's very expensive for our young people. That's why I was saying, Pastor Lelo, sometimes it's not that these members want to do this or your church members want to do this. This is what they've been believing and they've been seeing. This has become a culture to them. It's right. So it's sort of right. It's sort of, this is acceptable. It's not a gray area. It must be done like this. And when they come to us in counseling, we also say to them, no, do it like this. So over years, they've been seeing that and they want to do it that way. So they are just following what has been happening.
Absolutely. And that's where I'm coming from, brothers. I do have a couple even in our church. Lobola paid, but not yet married because there's going to be those events. So this is relevant. I'm not speaking from someone who has ticked. I'm just a facilitator poking and poking.
Before you come in,
yeah.
After you paid the lobola, somebody told me, your family requested your bride. You took your bride to Eastern Cape.
Yes. That's a good point.
Where you
Xhosa culture.
Right.
You paid lobola.
Yeah.
The same day you paid lobola.
Yeah.
Get the wife to come.
Yeah.
There were older ladies waiting on that same day to. You spoke about the in-laws just grooming the bride. They were waiting to groom the bride. The event was done to welcome her. Bar the ancestors. We didn't involve the ancestors. We killed a sheep. And in our Xhosa culture, it's a goat that you use for ancestors. So we killed it just for meat, and the elders advised and gave counsel. And she wore the clothes of a wife, Makoti, welcomed as a wife fully. When that day ended in our family, she was a wife completely.
Yeah. You should have started your honeymoon.
We should have started our honeymoon. I'm saying we didn't.
Take the goat.
We didn't. No. Yes, I chose. No. Yes. So this is good because it makes the context of my question that I'm not attacking you as someone who's superior. I'm just saying it's a relevant issue. Sorry? It needs to be thought through. We need to interrogate these things. So I will not let you go, brothers. I will not let you go. But let's get back to this institution. Alan, do you want to contribute?
Yeah, I was just going to add this whole process that we were discussing about the African cultural wedding and then the so-called white wedding. And I was ignorant for a long time until I began to discuss this whole concept of white wedding with actual couples. And, you know, I was under the illusion, you might laugh, but I was under the illusion that a white wedding meant a wedding where a bride wears a white dress. You know, that's the central part of a white wedding. And they said, no, it's a wedding the way white people do it. But that did, you know, the definition didn't bother me much until I asked those couples more, and I discovered that when we're speaking about the church having the official voice, I now pronounce you man and wife, that wasn't as important as the fact that in an African cultural wedding, the bride is not celebrated specifically as much as the bride is celebrated in a typical white wedding. So there's never a time where she gets to wear the dress and everyone says, wow, you're beautiful, and all the speeches are about her and she gets honored. My uncle used to say that a wedding is a woman's event. The man is just there to make it official. And that's kind of the way a white wedding happens, hey? The bride is if I can say, the glorious one. In the middle of the whole, everyone celebrates the bride. And the groom is there with her. So I discovered that a lot of the couples that I've counseled, that's it, because we've given them as a church, we've given them the option after a cultural wedding, at the end of a normal church service, would you like to come and you can commit yourselves to each other as man and wife, and we can celebrate that officially. But nobody really takes us up on that offer because of this one element. You know, that the white wedding is where the bride is celebrated. And I think a lot of ladies who go through African cultural marriages end up feeling something's missing, because it's more like a joining of families than a bride being celebrated. I think a lot of ladies love that.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true. And I need Sihle as well. It's good that you raise your hand, but hopefully it won't distract your train of thoughts, because I want to throw something that, and Sihle will be leaving soon at 12. He has another appointment, so we'll give you grace on that. We'll also take a break at that time, but I want him to start this comment, because my question now is, saying the family institution is the one that recognizes, does it have absolute authority in recognizing a marriage? And let me give some parentheses and brackets on that. In cases where it actually serves to deter marriages as even community now. In cases where it sets conditions that general would be regarded unreasonable. In cases where it wants participation to ancestral worship before it recognizes marriage. What happens in those cases, since most of you, not all of you, have advocated for the family, the father? Let's even give a typical example of a father. Before I give the hand of my daughter to you, we have to do this ancestral stuff. If we did not do it, I do not recognize, administer, sanction, officialize, take it off as marriage. You are not married in our eyes. In that case, and now I've made an example of just in a single family unit, but I want you to exploit in terms of, hypothetically, most families in the community. Most unbelieving families in the community, in that particular culture, they want you to do the ancestral stuff before definitionally they recognize it as marriage. If you did not do that, they do not recognize it as marriage. In those cases, what do you do if family is the institution you've said biblically is delegated authority? Sihle, your first point that you wanted to comment, and then have an opinion on this one, and then we'll take a break as you think about this question, brothers.
Okay, I'll start with the one about Western and African culture, because I'm finding it now in a more city, urban setting, that there's a lot of things that are happening. There's migration, there is westernization of African people. There's all of these elements where it's not just, the white people in my church, this is their Western way, we'll go the Western way. and the black people, they understand culture, they understand customs, and therefore I'll just have to disciple them to say, guys, you should know this better. No. There's a whole lot of things happening here. There are people coming from different countries. There are people coming from African countries, yeah. So, and there are people, I mean, my wife came from a very religious family, if I can put it that way, that wrongly or rightly, no, wrongly, I would say, they I hope my wife is not listening. You can edit that.
So we'll edit this one for the wife.
Yeah. They had, I mean, from, Pentecostal background in those days, that sort of discarded culture. You know what I mean? And then when she grows up, she just grows up in a Christian family, as it were. And therefore, for them, they are saying, forget about all of that stuff. We are just going the Western way. As much as they won't say that, they are using Christian language and all of that. Yeah, more spiritual language. So you got all of those elements. You got brothers from, we have brothers from Malawi and Zimbabwe, all of those things where they're just saying, this is what we would recognize, or this is what we would go with as a couple in terms of being in a church and that. So there are all of those elements that are not necessarily just this is black, this is white, but also within African, it's more westernized. And I think maybe we can also press in on that, because that's that. And even, again, in terms of sacraments, I mean, I think we going back on discipling the church in terms of what institution is there for recognizing the marriage. I think for me, even just my takeaway, I need to disciple my church well in that, because that's where we find ourselves in all of those problems. But also, like, even with regards to sacraments, like to say, because I mean, even now as we are talking about it, I'm thinking about more to say, man, when it comes to a sacrament is almost like, let me think of baptism. You are recognizing what has already happened. God has already regenerated this person, and we're sort of doing this ceremony, as it were, to recognize what has happened, and we communicate that. And I think sometimes in marriage we don't do that, and sometimes we do that replicating the sacrament. This is exactly your point, which I think we have to think through these things well. But there are all of these elements of, in an urban city, there are so many things that are happening to navigate, and I think we have to think through those things well. But now going back to your question.
Come back to my question,
Yes,
because
coming
you are
back to your
living,
question. Yes,
and
yes,
I'm not
yes.
letting you go.
What's
without
your
a
question
response.
again? Yes.
My question is, since there seems to be an advocacy for family being the one that administers, sanctions, recognizes, officializes, what happens when family units and even community and even cultures put conditions before recognition that, one, I would use unreasonable. Unreasonable, I mean, it could be just financial stipulation that are impossible to meet, at least in your lifetime. Two, I would say unbiblical, that would include ancestral worship. In such cases, since you are advocating for the families to institute, and when it's happening now commonly, not just one particular family that's having this view, commonly as a culture. Maybe I'll make an example of my culture, Xhosa. In the Xhosa culture, if they start to say, we will only recognize once you do this particular ancestral event. Without doing this, we do not as a community recognize you as marriage. Since you're advocating for family, in those instances, how should you then as a Christian proceed? Should you partake in that ancestral so that you are recognized? Should you part ways with marriage itself and just live single as a Christian people living in that community? How do you navigate?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think.
So to preface it, it does happen, brothers. It
yeah,
does.
no,
So
definitely.
It's not totally hypothetical. It's really relevant.
Yeah.
You've negotiated, most of you brothers, Lobola.
Yeah.
It does happen.
Yeah.
It does. It does. So it's really relevant.
Yeah. I mean, I've had instances where it's like the families will say, it's either you do it our way or you don't do this at all. If you want to do your church thing, you do your church. But if you're going to do this, if you're going to involve us, I mean, we've been there. And I think for for us as a church, obviously, like the word of God is authority for everything. And therefore we go with that in mind. We go with that in mind also in terms of we want to, firstly, our approach or our first instance is to respect the families. We don't, from get-go, what is the family saying, and we want to respect the family, we want to hear them out. But also the assumption is that the couple is also discipled well in that. Because I mean, it's not just marriage, it's different things in terms of family or individuals having to do certain things in families that don't align with the word of God. And they have to deal with that as individuals in their families. But when it comes to us as a church, or like me as a pastor, I would really want that couple. Firstly, I'm not just going to come and involve myself where it's not my time yet, or it's not even my place. You know, sometimes those are things are family matters that they just need to happen with the couple and the family. How do we respect the family, but how do we keep the standard of the word of God in that situation? Do I have an answer? No.
That's good. That's good. No. It's not an easy one. I will even give the brothers just a break so to think about this. Two things. The blame you should actually give is to Ulelo. When we asked Lelo to preach last year, he took a very, very unique angle, and that challenged and provoked our young people in such a godly way, because he came to a people that is so fond of exceptions, and Lelo put aside the exceptions and went to the norm. This instinct that you just spoke about, honor parents, respect parents, which I felt as well after he spoke that we're actually drifting away from this instinct of honoring. We're actually starting to live in exceptions and make our base in exceptions. And you brought us back last year to say, but the instinct, the primary instinct, the default instinct is to honor. You guys like to dwell on exceptions. So you are actually the blame of where we've headed. So that's one. Two, the person I'm giving some slight grace to this is actually Alan, because this question, he seems to be the one who might actually be more consistent with this type of question, with that view that you before God as a couple, even without this, the institution as secondary, important, secondary, but not necessarily for definitional purposes. But I still would ask that you consider a response as well, Alan, as well. So I'll pause it here. I know Lelo wants to say something.
I just have a question. Do we need a break? Because I think we're closing at 1, and
Yeah.
this conversation is so full.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering,
Ju-
do we need,
just-
do we,
Yeah, we need just 2 minutes for bathroom. Yeah, just 2 minutes. Just 2 minutes.
When you say break, I mean, I'm thinking 30 minutes.
No, just 2 minutes. We need to rush to the bathroom. So we'll pause it there. Sihle, thank you, brother. We would have wanted more insight, but we understand. Yeah, thank you. No, thank you, brothers. I hope you were refreshed a little bit. And I hope with those probably 90 seconds or so, you've thought out this difficult question in those few seconds that I gave you. But yeah, just to further just remind what our question was, the base of it is how absolute is the authority of the family institution. And then the particular example to test that principle is in cases where the family has set unreasonable conditions. I can even give an example of that, but they set conditions that you would not be able to meet in your lifetime. One, so I'm talking now dowry, lobola, or hoops or whatnot. David was asked for foreskins. Maybe the population that you are asked for foreskins is just impossible to do it in your lifetime. Laban was asked to ask Jacob to work. Maybe the time that you have to work is 100 years, and average you only live 60 years or so. So it's unlikely that you will work enough and then get your wives. So that's the idea of reasonable and unreasonable.
Yeah.
Two, unbiblical. Now I'm talking about ancestral events in our context. In other contexts, there could be other things that are unbiblical that are put in there, even in other cultures. So the principle apply to those as well. I'm just zooming in on, especially in our South African culture, uh, the community, not just individual family units, but even now commonly in the community, the standard that has been set definitionally for them to consider it as a marriage, not good, bad, godly, just to be considered a marriage in that community now, you have to do some ancestral stuff. So how do we shepherd our people in that circumstance? Yeah. Should they at least in this time make an exception, disobey God and repent later? Should they at this time abandon the whole thing of marriage and then as a community to abandon marriage, as Christian people at least? So it's unbelievers who will get married, but not Christian people because of what's said in that. And to further poke at this is, imagine a widespread, because I can anticipate some responses that will go to another culture. Imagine a widespread, and it is common in some of our cultures, that there is an event that needs to be done. Our cultures do have an ancestral part to it. So widespread, most of the cultures in our South Africa are having a similar view. Yeah. How do you shepherd your congregant in that to think through that?
I mean, I think we all have probably examples where we've had to deal with this to some level or another. And so while the question is hard, I think one does have some guardrails or things that we've thought through, I'm sure, being pastors here. So this is where we shine as pastors. Because, you know, you were busy.
Not this question.
Yeah, you were busy taking us to the academy here. Yeah. Now you've come to us, imagine. Now you've come to us. You're dealing with our experience, imagine. Now let us talk to you. No. Okay. So I think you're asking a number of even your question has a number of layers, and I do think that it would be wise to not conflate those layers. On the question, for example, of the ancestral, I think there needs to be a bit of maturity in how we understand this question of ancestral. I think sometimes we just say ancestral, but we're actually not sure what exactly we're talking about in the scope of the families. And I think this is where people who don't understand what all that goes on might actually end up saying things too strongly than they should. So I'll give you a case. Okay.
Give an example.
No, let me give one. Let me make the distinction rather. The distinction that I'm trying to, there's a distinction between, as part of the wedding ceremony, you need to go to the ancestors. For example, in my culture, in the Zulu culture, there would be a situation where when the wife comes over, then goes to the kraal and all of that to be. So that's that.
Nyongo being what?
Nyongo being bile. What is it? Bile.
Yeah, bile.
Bile from the cow.
Yeah, it is.
Inyongo, but I don't know what it is.
No.
I don't know.
I'm accommodate. It's a bile.
Yeah. Okay. So then there's that. There's your participation in this ritual.
Yeah.
And then there's the and then there's the second part of it, which is where the family does a ritual on their own. Okay. Here's where I draw the distinction, and here's where a lot of the fights I've found can be won. I don't go to a pagan and tell them to not do paganism. A pagan is a pagan, right? A person's going to worship who they want to worship, and if there are particular rites and rituals at each particular life event. A pagan gets a car in this particular religion, and then they have to go to their god, Zeus, and say, thank you for giving me the car, right? Or somebody dies in the life of and then I need to go and do this for the god. So there's an event, there's a life event that is normative, that everybody participates in, but then there's the religion that attaches to it. Meaning, I don't go around to pagans telling them to not do that. If you are doing, because here's the thing now, if they are my parents, and this is their religion, so this is what they want to do on their own time without me not involved, I think sometimes we try to fight fights that are not ours. Like this person is doing their own thing because Bona, they're saying, okay, in my religion, my child is getting married, I need to go and let them know. Don't involve me. The only issue is that you know where I stand. I mean, I believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. I do not believe in your religion, and so I'm not going to participate in anything that involves your religion. And so don't involve me. I don't even want to know. I don't want to participate. The trouble happens because we think it's being done in our name. We think it's our thing. But no, it's the parents in their own religion doing something that there's a life event that triggers a particular religious response in their own religion. So as long as we make that separation quite clear, that like it's not my thing, it's yours. I've found that 90% of the battle, once you make that distinction, 90% of the battle is won. So then I've hardly had someone who says, we're not going to move forward at all, because then what I'm saying, because then what's actually known within the cultures, even within that religion itself, we don't give that religion its own merits. Even with that religion itself, it's understood. Okay, fine. If this person doesn't want to participate, it's been so long that people have not been participating in these things that it can be baked into the cake that you don't want to participate. You might find that 1% person who says, no, you have to, like this. But in my experience and in speaking to others, once we make this distinction, it eradicates most of our challenges. So I think that there needs to be we need to actually open this, when we say answer, we need to open this up a bit more. To be clear, to know if the person is doing it, if they're having a funeral, I'm going to go to my family's funeral. Let's say my uncle passes away in the family, and my family, a part of my family is Christian, and a part of my family participates in this religion. Then the part of the family that participates in this religion sees it as a must that certain things be done because the uncle has passed away. And those of us who are Christian know that we only participate in the funeral, and we'll give money for the funeral stuff, for all the family stuff. We are able to separate it that way. We have a bit of hypertension whenever it becomes a wedding because we think it's about us. But I think we need to make the same kind of wise distinction, and then don't involve me. I don't want to get involved, but I'm not going to come into your house and tell you what. Now, if you ask me, I would love for you not to do this. Even more than that, I'd love for you to actually repent and come to Christ. Like, that's what I'd love for to happen. But I'm not going to police you in your own house doing things that you know I disagree with. It's your own house, and you're doing things, just as long as you don't involve me. So on the ancestral piece, that's where I'd have. And then we can go to the unreasonable one, the unreasonable conversation, which could be, but maybe we can interact more.
No, before it goes there, it's not yet, there is a few points here. One, would it be fair to say that would not be the context where you challenge it? Because the assumption I make is that you would want, in general, as Christian people, to challenge pagan, sinful practices. Whether it's in the pulpit, whether it's evangelism, you would want to challenge them. It's not like they just have a leeway, do what you do, we do what you do.
Yes.
It's not relative in that sense. Yes. But as I'm hearing you, that would not be the context. You would not, at that point,
because we're trying to get married.
That's not the point.
Wise as serpents here.
Yes.
I'm trying to get through this issue. I'm also trying to win the other side of the family because I want them to not make so many barriers for me in getting married with this person. So let's try and let me not make mountains out of these issues. Because at the end of the day, I'm going to evangelize these people. These people I'm here. I'm going to evangelize them over time by the Lord's grace. And so let's get over this. As long as I do not break the law of the Lord in what I participate in, and I mean, even with that whole Gehazi thing is the example I like to use. I mean, that was quite a messy. I don't know how pastors make. I mean, it's such a messy thing where Gehazi says, "I'm going to go with my master." Not Gehazi. Sorry, what's his name? Gehazi was a servant. Sorry, Naaman is the guy. Naaman and his master goes to the house of Rimmon, right? And he has to hold. It says, "Please pray that the Lord your Lord does not, when I go with him to the house, I'm only supporting him. It's not me. Meaning I'm taking this sand here, this soil here, because I believe this is the God. I mean, what do you make of that? It kind of makes me allowed. Okay, fine. There's a bit of a dance here. I don't want to participate. I don't want to be involved at all. But there's a context to things, and unfortunately, I'm living in the world with pagans, and so I need to find a way to coexist with them, while at the same time trying to show them towards Christ. So that's how.
But I'm coming, Chris. No.
He's not done with me.
I'm coming. So we have to iron these things.
Okay,
right?
iron it.
So that's what I understand you clearly. The reason why I'm ironing that understanding is I wouldn't want someone who's listening to think that you are saying we don't challenge paganism.
No.
Like they have a right to do what they do. We as Christians just do what we do. It's not the context, not the place. It's not to do that. You could in a pulpit be challenging that, but that's the person's house. Not at that point.
Yes.
Yeah, that's why
and
I'm
also,
just
I would
ironing
also
that.
want to be clear. Like we challenge all these things, but the primary way we challenge these things is the gospel.
It's the gospel. Yeah.
We are trusting the Spirit of God
Yeah.
to do a powerful work in
Yeah.
people's lives.
Absolutely.
And so we can go through all the pagan practices, but the biggest thing is, how will they believe if they're not here?
Yeah.
And so, we want to funnel most of our emphasis to praying to God to give us gospel opportunities, not just challenging your pagan practice opportunities,
Absolutely.
but more so gospel opportunities, so that the whole man gets changed. Now, of course, I understand if you eradicate all pagan practices, society will be better, etc., and so forth. And that's fine.
But your point is good. Your point is
I'm
good.
evangelist.
You expose them
Yeah.
for the sake of them having a relationship with
Coming to
Christ.
Christ.
It's not for the sake of just saying you are a drunkard and that's it.
Now you're no longer a
No.
drunkard. Yeah.
There's grace. So I
Thank you.
100%. With the comment to say, I do understand the 90%, and that's probably, as you say, from your experiences, that 90% of these cases would be solved if we made this distinction between family and pagan rituals and your individual participation. Slightly, I may probably say it might be less than that. It might be maybe 7 or whatnot, because of recent cases where actually families did want participation, and that was ingrained in the ceremony itself. Individual participation of these people. Some of those practices, even from Zulu culture, where it's individual participation is required. But you are right on the other side, and I've experienced this as well, that concessions have been made, that they have allowed, where you say, can I not participate? Because of just so many times that Christian people have taken the stand. I've experienced that where they say, okay, if you don't want to participate, but we'll do it.
We will do it.
Yeah, you are right.
So my point is, I'm not saying we don't still have a challenge. We still have a challenge, because there is going to be those people who don't care that in society and in culture and in community in South Africa that there's been so many people who don't participate. There are people who don't participate, not even for religious reasons. They just don't want to participate in that stuff. They think it's they quote unquote nonsense. So they don't. So because there are some people who are like, I don't care what you feel like in my household. Like this is what we do, and you're going to do it. And so they still. I haven't answered that question. I could say I think there can be some marinating, some working through, some praying, trusting the Lord to change the heart of the king. I think there's a number of things available to us in trying to deal with that. The point that I was simply making is that we need to make that distinction, because that covers, and so that even our consciences are not so touched when a pagan is doing paganism without me. Because half the time I'm fighting this issue because I don't want it done at all. And of course I don't want it done. But the reality is, am I going to police an unbeliever in his unbelievingness? And what level am I? So that's the point that I'm trying to bring into here before we.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate cutting that aside to say there are times where it's just family participation. For example, what they do with the lobola after you've given it. you are not involved. They may not need your participation. We take your lobola and we take it to Msama to give thanks to ancestors. But you are not involved. We didn't invite you, all of that.
So
yeah,
the-
so I'm
the-
understanding what you're
Yes,
saying.
the
Yeah.
facilitator is he not agreeing with your position?
No.
Now we are taking 30 minutes.
No. Before we move, I do want to. So I understand. I'm just saying to Lelo, and I appreciate that you are making. No. Chris. The facilitator does not need to take any position. The facilitator is there to facilitate the discussion. So I'm just appreciating the distinction you are making and give an example where this distinction is actually very important and relevant. So I appreciate that.
I wanted to make sure because I'm repeating what he's saying in different ways. So I may also take 24 minutes, 27 answering because I'm saying exactly what is my Brother Lelo is saying. I think I agree with Brother Lelo, what he's saying. I think over time, through experiences, through mistakes, we realize that we forget sometimes that we are living in a fallen world. Where our world is not perfect, and we know the perfect world in Genesis, before Genesis 3. From there, whatever we are discussing is there. It's all the way until we get to Christ, until the end, and our Lord coming back. We are dealing with these issues that continue to be a thorn in our flesh because the world is fallen. And sometimes when we deal with these things, we want these perfect wedding, so to speak. These, which shows that I'm a Christian. Everybody agrees and walks away and say, wow, what a Christian wedding. I wish that. No, even if it's perfect like that, it would not save those people. Because the people are sinners, they still need the gospel. Now, why am I saying that and begin with that? Because I've realized that many fights, as he's saying, we are ended up dealing with is actually seeking to make these in-laws Pharisees. We want them to start acting like they are Christians. And they are not. Actually, one older lady asked me a question. He said, do you have a daughter? I said, yes. Say, if your daughter is getting married to somebody who believes these cultural things and so on, both of your daughter and his husband, they are saying to you, they now believe, for example, in Muslim, religion. Would you agree you now do things the way they do? I'm like, as you are challenging me. Then he said, you want me to act like I'm a Christian, agreeing with Christian things and do every ceremony the way Christians do things, and you want children to tell me how must I do my culture. And I'm not going to do that. So, and at that time, I realized that what am I trying to do? Now, I'm not discussing the gospel with this person. What I'm discussing is the practices. What the person must do and what the person must not do. I'm trying to win them over. No. I shouldn't win this person to act like a Christian. I should be clear on the gospel. What will save the person? What will send the person heaven or hell? Not these practices. And we need to be clear on that. I think that's why I'm saying I'm agreeing with Brother Lelo to say which mountain to die on. But sometimes we wanted to die on this mountain. Now, Jonas Mbiti help us. I think if you have not read him, he help us to understand the culture. He's not providing the answers, but he help us to understand why they do what they do. How do they understand marriage? Not how we understand marriage. One is saying it is a covenant, they take that. It is, they consider clans, that they need to be a clan or that family. They consider that, and they consider the witnesses. And according to the witnesses is this community celebration and so on. And they are not done. They consider their ancestors, that they are part now of this family, and they are not done. They consider the children. That is why he says in an African context, those things constantly become a problem. Even if everything goes well and there's no children, they still don't see this as a perfect marriage according to them, why there's no children? Are the ancestors not happy? Nah, that's the question they're asking. So then it's saying, according to them, now it's not the way we understand it, but according to them, yes, it is a covenant. Yes, there must be this clan, this family. This clan specifically, what are the Zulus doing? What are the Sutus doing? They differ on what they emphasize. That's what it's saying. And now they're going to look at the witnesses, the community now. What are the communities saying on this? And number 4, the involvement of the ancestors. And then you explain how do these ancestors, why are they including the ancestors there? These two people, according to them, they've got their own ancestors. Now they are confusing their ancestors. If this one is moving to your family, they need to inform the ancestors that, oh, you don't be surprised. That person is now changing the surname. Okay? Yes, that's what they are saying. Is changing the surname, is moving now away to this family. Just understand that. They are informing the ancestors. That's why it's coming very heavy on them. And we say, no, it's coming very heavy. They want to do this. So, then with the children also, they say why to them is a big issue. He said, according to them, some of these ancestors come back, reincarnate in a form of these children. That's why they'll say your child look like your grandfather. According to them, he has come back in the form of this child. This child may not even be disciplined at home because umkhulu. That's why when the children are born, they will say umkhulu. Is the grandfather, oh, umkhulu. And you will say, no, his name is given. They say, hey, umkhulu. According to way they understand. Now,
I appreciate
coming
that,
to your
brothers, but
question,
I'll have to
I'm
give
bringing
a push, a nudge because
yeah.
of my
Now
time.
I'm coming to your
brothers,
yeah.
After you ironed it and you further ironed it, my question now is not based on the family,
Right.
on all of that.
Sure.
It's based on that aspect where the family requires participation of the individual couple before they recognize that to be a marriage.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at.
Understand why I gave you the context.
Yeah,
because
I do, yeah.
it has everything to do with the expectation, with the pushback, with what you call unreasonable. Because according to them, that is their worldview. That's how they think about everything you want to do. If you say, for example, you're not going to do any of the ceremonies, according to them, you are causing problems in the marriage for you. That's what they think. Because according to them, your ancestors will not recognize your marriage. Do you see? In my understanding, I don't think the ancestors must recognize my marriage. My marriage are recognized by God. That's what I believe. So it's a different religion altogether.
But
So
it
now,
exists.
let me-
It exists and it's there, and
Right.
people do face
Right.
that requirement to participate.
Correct.
How do we shepherd our congregants
Sure.
who are required not just to approve the family doing
Yes.
their own stuff, but who are required actively, physically,
Yeah.
not invited, required. Invitation you can refuse. You are required.
Yeah.
Without that requirement, they will not recognize that. Because we've heard that, brothers, it's a serious case. We've had cases where
Where is the point of discussion? I think the point of discussion, in my view, for our members, as we help them to say, if this is how these people understand this thing, how do they understand marriage? I've always now started giving them to say, tell them to tell you how do they understand marriage. Because according to them, they need to include the ancestral issues. They need to say, this is how you need to do it, and then you need to begin to ask questions, because we are not asking questions. We just say we don't do. Only then you will be able to say, I can do A, B, C, D, but this is going now against my religion, against what I believe, okay? Because now I'm being told to participate now. I'm being told to go and consult. I'm being told to be Mtelo and Nyongo and being part of this and say, no, I've turned away from that belief. I'm no longer believing that. And I'm saying, in my views, the problem is that our members, if they start that discussion on the wedding day, that discussion is late. When did I start that discussion with my grandmother? When I got saved. We went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. There's ceremonies I'm attending, I'm not attending, back and forth. When I got saved, it was not a problem. Sorry, when I was getting married. Why is not a problem? The whole family knows what I believe. The whole family knows what I attend, what I don't attend, how am I helping, where am I ending. Because I'm saying this is against my beliefs. I believe this. But what happens with the young people, it seems like to me, the families are surprised on the day. When they propose to them to say, you must slaughter a goat, only that day they start hearing that, no, me, I'm actually cannot slaughter a goat.
Let me come in. No, you cannot pass the mic. Let me come in. There's some points, I want these points at the end because these are pastoral wisdom and counsel. You've mentioned some of them, even praying about this, taking time to pray about this, even the hearts that God can move. I want these points. Declaring your convictions early to your family, way before these events come. Those are pastoral counsel on the side of ought to be done. So I appreciate them, and I want them even at the end in closing statements. I want this pastoral wisdom. But I'm still asking, in that instance where the community has put an unbiblical condition of ancestral participation for the couple, should the couple participate? Because there is implication for either one. If the couple participates, they will meet the recognition of the family, but they will be intentional and consciously acting in disobedience to God. If the couple does not participate, the family, they will not be getting married. The choice to them, when they don't participate, do they proceed and recognize themselves as a couple without the family institution, or do they abandon the whole idea of that marriage and just come back and live separately and be single people? And I'm saying post prayers, post interventions, post the years of negotiation, post the patience and the intervention, they are still not budging as a community. They have set this condition of bile or whatnot as a condition for marriage. In those cases, should we then as Christian people allow them to pause marriages, to say, then we as Christian people will not get married in this culture? There will be no marriages because they are the institution that affirm marriage, although they have set an unbiblical one. Or will we get married without them and bypass them in those cases where they are requiring us to disobey God? Because and I would venture to say to most of you brothers, you would answer this question maybe even more easier if I asked you about government. And I asked you about government, whether if government requires you to do something that's unbiblical, will you still obey the government?
Yeah, let's answer that question.
You can come back if you think that's not too obvious. It's not too obvious.
Yeah.
Are there instances where the government can ask you to do something that is against the word of God? That's clearly against the word of God. Yes. I'm saying you would answer that easily. So I'm saying in this case, because marriage, you would agree, is a good thing. He who finds a wife finds a good thing. It's good to multiply. It's good for society. In that case, and it's not ordained, would then the resolution be we allow this culture or community to say there will be no marriages? In fact, Christians will not get married in this community. So in South Africa, we are agreeing that Christians will not get married.
Yeah, maybe answering from the reason to give you the picture to understand where you're gonna clash. The reason was where you're gonna clash as a Christian. Apostle Paul gave us principles how to answer those things, like in Romans 1 Corinthians 8, Romans 14 and 15, dealing with gray areas, but also dealing with meat sacrifice to idols. Where you are told specifically, this is for idols. This is for idols worship. We want you to participate. The answer is clear. You cannot do it. The answer is clear because he said, if they tell you, then he said you don't do. If you don't know, if it's a cultural practice that you don't know, actually he said don't ask questions. When they serve you meat, eat. Stop asking, is it a sheep or a goat? Because that's where Christians causes problems. You go ask, is it a sheep or a goat? Then you're not going to eat. Yeah. Paul says, don't eat. Eat. Don't ask questions for the sake of your conscience. Because immediately now you know that they tell you, oh, that cow we were asking you is because we wanted to mix a ceremony to mix the ancestors. No, you're not going to eat. So
you are
answering
aware,
your
because
question.
there are exceptions, we can move. So you are aware why they are doing this. You were raised in this culture. You
Right.
understand. Would it be fair that all of you would say don't participate? Would it be fair for all of you brothers?
To say what?
Don't participate. You are aware that they are doing this for ancestral and they are requiring your individual participation.
Yeah.
Would it
Yeah.
be fair for all of you brothers? So then the next question then is, when you refuse to participate there, what's the next step? What's the next step? And I'm asking this even on the broad level, that do we then say Christians in this community in South Africa, for example, then will not get married?
And that's why it's one of the reasons I don't see the family in Genesis 2. You know, that it is possible to get married before God and legally without your family even knowing. And it's possible to go through an African cultural wedding without even knowing, having any idea of what a biblical marriage or biblical marriage commitments look like, and still a valid wedding. So for us, you know, when we have a situation like this with premarital counseling, one of the things I do early on in premarital counseling is, it's normally cross-cultural, even though it's an African union. I ask them, what do you foresee ahead? You know, according to what rituals, what is your family going to require of you, and what's your family going to require of you? And ask if those two families understand each other's requirements. And then I've got into trouble before with that, because then I expect them to know what is going to be wrong. And I've learnt that a couple who tells me what their family expects of them, they also expect me to say, here are some red lines. You know, if you went over this line, you would be sinning against God. So I talk it out with the guy and the girl, and I find out for them, you know, if you cross this line, do you believe you would be sinning against God? And we can discuss it. So long before we even get to the point of talking to the parents, we've got red lines. And often the red lines will be rituals like that, and I liked what Lelo had to say. We've often come to that point where I will not do this, but I don't care if my aunt or uncle, it doesn't matter what they do. They can do whatever they please, but I will not do this. And that's often solved the problem. But then secondly, if there is an objection, in my experience, it's not normally a whole crowd of people you have to please. It's just the dad, or it's just the mom, or it's a particular individual who is a stronghold. And we focus on that person, and we come to the point and you say, I'm afraid I can't do that humbly, and all of that. And if a person doesn't yield, we give him time and be a little stronger and a little stronger till the point you say, no, I will not do that. I want to get married, but I will not do that. And that often dissolves the problem. Some of the people have been very surprised when they've directly contradicted the dad of the bride. And he said, oh, it's okay, it doesn't matter. You know, the one guy said, do not get married, you know, before you're 30 years old, you know. And then he comes and he's like 26 and he wants to get married, and his dad's like, well done, you know, you found a good... So people can change. If we go beyond that point, then we have to be patient. A couple should, you know, in wisdom, they shouldn't just forge it. The clock is ticking, but it's not ticking in such a way, I have to be married now. You know, that couple can be patient, and they can wait for people, like Lelo even was saying, for people to come around, a dad to say, I like this guy, and I want my daughter to marry this guy, and I don't want to lose this guy, you know, because he's obviously a man of character. So give him patience, you know, give him time. And one thing I've also learned is that if you give a couple patience in a church setting, that often character issues come up between the couple. And you get an opportunity to see whether these people should be married or not. If a guy gets angry at the dad because he won't let me marry the daughter, hold on, dude. Now we need time to work through this issue. You know, so that helps it. And then maybe when this guy grows in character and he goes with genuine humility to the dad and says, man, sorry I was pushing so much. You know, I didn't want to disrespect you, and he comes and he's humble, the dad will see the change in him, and dad will bring about the change. So pastorally, those are some of the things I've learned too.
And I appreciate this pastoral because it's excellent. So would we say then from that advice that we wait patiently, prayerfully with interventions and counsel indefinitely?
That's the tricky point.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
we're moving around that, and
Yeah.
I want this pastoral because we're again talking to people who are shepherding them. But I do want to have this idea because it seems like we're moving away from.
I know you, but I think I have an issue with your question and the framing of your question, brother. So I'm not going to let you go.
Okay.
Okay. So I think you are assuming a darkness that doesn't exist, like wholesale. You are assuming a widespread darkness and an intensity. With an intensity amongst African people that I don't think generally exists. Generally, we're spending a lot of time talking about a very small minutia of issue. People, what he's just described, of like that, we'll take time, let's push, and then we'll increase intensity. I couldn't have said that in English anywhere better. That's the best English way to put it. It was perfect, because then you find people actually melt. Because there are even songs that we sing in our African cultures about weddings, like Akzange Ubenje, La Peka. People want to see weddings. They're just not used to them because of how certain things have gone. So I guess I'm concerned that we are viewing the culture much more darkly than it is widespread. A lot of the times things happen because of approach. The approach at the beginning. Like a brother comes from the church and he goes to his family and says, okay guys, I want to get married in 6 months. This is what's going to happen. Okay. And then he's a kid in this house. And he goes and he tells them, because he's been watching people on YouTube from America, and they've told him, you should get married by 23. And so he's come with his own plan, and he comes and he tells his African parents, here's my plan. And then that blows up everything because everybody's disrespected. You don't do that. What you simply do is you go, I've found the one.
Yeah.
I'm done going to the river, talking to different girls. Now I've found the one that I want to bring into the home. What do we do, family? With humility and those kinds of things. The authoritarian structure of the African family works with proper respect given to it, that melts it and gets things to move. Even if it's not just you, the family members around, the other uncles, sometimes it can be hard, but if we just push through, and with that point about patience, not in our timeline, I think that's where most of our battles are won. So that's why I'm pushing back, Angane, brother, to you, right?
Yeah.
Not to accuse you, but to say I don't think we should. There will be that exceptional situation where it's really dark, and the person, after all of these patient steps, a year, 2 years, 3 years, these people are still not budging. And I think then we handle it in that situation. But I don't think that's the norm for most of the viewers.
Yeah. So I'm saying the approach then, we're saying we should not give any response to those exceptions. Principle-wise, we should not until they actually happen.
I wonder if some of these things can be handled in church, practically, privately. A one blanket answer here might be devastating. I wonder about the wisdom of saying no. Well, then we're going to say just go ahead and get married. I wonder if there's a number of other things.
But you could say the opposite as well, that because you've mentioned that it's not a command to get married. I'm saying you are free to say the opposite, where you say, since they are not commanded to get married, they can do this. Patience can last 10 years sometimes.
Yes.
Patience can last 15 years.
Then wisdom
sometimes.
comes in and other things comes in. Okay, should we be,
But it's all assuming that until God moves this parent or the father, you will not get married.
Yeah,
Then how you go about it, patiently, prayerfully, counseling.
I need to remember we're dealing
because
with
you're not
both
commanded.
definitional and also ought, mind. And mind you, we're in the pastoral aspect.
Yes.
So
yes.
we're dealing
I
with.
see the ought. Yeah,
See,
the ought is coming.
We're
very
dealing
good.
with
Yeah.
the definitional,
Yeah.
and we might have a slightly different views on the definitional, but we all have the same passion about the
The
ought.
odd, absolutely.
And so the issue
Yeah.
here is more about
Absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's where like this is where it becomes. What should we do in order to win these people long term? We have those kinds of concerns.
Yeah,
Yeah.
before maybe jumps in, I wanted to say, I think what the brothers are saying here, even experientially, we've been not seeing families for the whole year or 2 years refusing. Sometimes they ask, change the date. It's too soon for us. No, they wouldn't want, the young people wouldn't want to do that. They just want to get married in 3 months' time from now. And the family, they are asking, no, let's make it next year. No, they wouldn't want to do that. And they say, you are telling us now, you are telling us we pay lobola now, we are getting married next week. Should we take that? That is always, I mean, I've been with you in lobola negotiations. That is always the problem. The families are told at the last hour. And this is a problem with our members. And this is the problem what we are raising, honoring your parents.
Honoring your parents.
The pastor knows that one, you like that girl. You've been dating that girl for this long. Now you are going to pay lobola. But your dad knows nothing about that.
And you've done premarital perhaps
Right.
as well. You've started.
You've
with
now
premarital.
starting premarital.
Yeah.
Your dad knows nothing.
Yeah.
Yes, he's an unbeliever. He knows nothing about premarital, but he knows everything about his son and his desire when must he get married. Okay? He has his desire. Again, when you look at our culture, they have a high view of marriage. I think what he's saying, we're looking at our culture as if they are against marriage. No, they say, when the kids are born, they're already discussing marriage. You will take my daughter. You will take my son. Now, when they prepare kids in the initiation school, they discuss marriage. You will be a man. You will have a wife. The young ladies, they are told, if you sleep like this, you don't clean, and so on and so forth. Whose makote are you gonna be? They always discussing this thing. Who to marry, who not to marry. They may not be Christians, right? So, our members sometimes, as I think I rightly put it, sometimes we are undermining the families. They always look at us as a church that we're coming in, there's no humility, the gospel is not being seen, and the people conclude that is their way or highway. If this is what they think, we are not part of it. That's why most of the time they say we are not part of it. But they can be persuaded through love, patience, prayer. Talk to them. More so, I would say this, and I've repeated. The people who are getting married need to be the one going and talk to their parents. Lovingly, in humility, persuading them and telling them, I really want to get married. One more story. One young man, he paid simple as, I think it was 5,000. He said, I want to talk to my father-in-law. I sat down with him and said, I want to get married. This is my work. This is how much I get. Which one cow that do you think I need to pay in order to get married? I'm a Christian. You say to a Christian, I want to get married. You know, he said the guy told him which cow he needs. And he said, how much is it? He said, it's going to cost you 5,000. He said, if I'm bringing that, will be fine. He said, I will defend you from the other family members. But he was humbled, and he went to talk to him, and he gave him a go-ahead.
Absolutely. Let's take Pastor Mike as well. But I will come back, brothers. I take no Lelo. No. The opposite to this is that the difficulty of this is saying now we must move away from definitional. And all along, all of you guys were fine with definitional. All of you were fine with definitional. When the question is getting rough, you are advocating that we move away from definitional and go to ought. And that's what we have to. And I understand that there's a good point. No, there's a good point to it. One of the good points you are making is that if we're still talking about relevancy, then the question now must not go that far, because our cultures don't go that far in relevance. It's not the relevant part is them patiently, prayerfully doing that. That's the common part. I take your point to say we may address that exception, but what's the common one? And that's where you're coming from. So I take that, but I'm just pushing back to say all of us were fine with definitional until a hard question came. So, no. He also agreed as well. So I'm saying I do still want in principle And that's how we test principles. We test principles with hypothetics. Is it hypothetical or hypothetical? Yeah, we do test principles with that. So we cannot refuse a discussion of asking, because the other parties have actually been in a situation like that. So it may be 1% to your experience, but I've actually been in a situation where it's 3 years now, and the family is not even slightly budging. It's saying, we'll never give you blessing until you do this. And what was worse is that you have to do this for our family, but before you do this for our family, even for the guy's family, they said, if they want to do that, you first have to do the other ancestral part for us before we do for them. So it's actually a real situation. So it may be an exception and something you would not deal with, but I would love a principal response to it. And then after that principal response, we can come to the practical pastoral theology, guiding, counseling our people then with all of what you've done. But to run away from it is not helpful to what we said from the beginning. All of you were fine in the beginning when we said, brothers, I'm speaking to pastors, the line between ought and just definition is it a marriage. All of you are fine. So let's take Pastor Mike.
So mine's more or less anecdotal based on what you guys have said already. I was in the, and it's not, didn't have anything to do with marriage, but my daughter-in-law is Zulu. And we were going through customs at the airport, and she was going to the U.S. to get citizenship. And her son had overstayed his visa. He was on an American passport, even though he's South African American. He'd overstayed it. And my Western response would have been to immediately say, we have our rights, we are, like this. And Futi just simply said, okay, what do I do? The guy calmed right completely down and just accepted. And he said, well, when you get back, you need to do X, Y, Z. And everything was fine. And he took her through the passport. He didn't give her any trouble at all. And I think that humility that you've talked about is important. And I don't know what you do in the long term when you're at a 3-year type of a situation. I think there is, at some point it does become we have to obey God rather than man. And I don't know whether there's you can say after 2 years and 6 months and 3 days and 5 hours, I don't think we can get to that point.
That would be unfair. I wouldn't press there. That would be unfair
Right.
to give an absolute period. I'm just testing the principle to say, is it there ever a period in those 20 years where you were begging for the blessing of the Father, where you bypass them?
Right.
If the answer is no there, then the principle is you never ever get married without the parents' approval. Even if it's a community stance that is taken in South Africa, that is unbiblical, the Christian people will remain single because the pagans have said you need to do this unbiblical step. That's just the principle I'm telling you. And that's easy to say, yes, we'll never get married, even if it's a white thing in South Africa, inconsistent to our principle. We'll never get married. We'll live as single people. Only the unbelievers will get married. We'll pray over it. We'll fast over it. We'll not just let it go. We'll still be challenging it. We'll preach against it. We'll evangelize against it. But until they take out that last condition, we will remain single. And then once you say that, you can come back to pastoral and address the common. But it seems like you brothers are moving from what to do there. In principle, it may take 10 years, it may take 15 years. Situations differ. I'm not pressing you to say, make all situations to be the same. I'm just testing the principle that, are you in that waiting and praying, saying, until he gives the blessing, we will never get married.
And that's why I'm
what
saying
asking,
that,
is the
yeah.
principle.
That's why I'm saying that there's that you eventually reach the point of we have to obey God rather than man. So I think that, the principle is obey the government. But if the government the principle is render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's and to God the things that are God's. But when Caesar takes the place of God, you don't render to Caesar the things that are God's. And there's a point, I think, and again, I think wisdom dictates it, where any human government, even ecclesiastical government, oversteps its bounds. There's a point where you have to make a stand. And I realize that this is a challenging one because I think the principle of obey your parents and honor your parents comes into this, but so does honor God. And so I think, I think with wisdom and discretion, we have to make a time where we say, we're going to make a stand here. And there'll be consequences. There was consequences to Peter and who was with him, not James, but whoever was with him. They got beat. Okay? So there are consequences. You may have consequences of a loss of a family relationship. And we don't want that. We want to avoid that at all, but not at all costs. We avoid it as much as we can and staying in obedience to God.
Absolutely, and I appreciate that, Pastor Mike, in terms of just thinking the principles. I'm not saying if you say we'll bypass, you do that in 6 months. I think all your advices with regard to that patience, the character, are taken into account. I'm just saying, in principle then, are you saying it's indefinite, will never proceed? And the reason why I'm asking, and maybe back to Lelo, is I want to take a step back and not paint them as dark. I take that advice. But on the other side, some of the African people are really serious about ancestral worship. Like they are serious. They love weddings, they love celebrations, but some of them, some families are really, really, really serious about ancestral worship, maybe more serious than we can consider, some of them.
Yeah, I think probably a text that fits better is live at peace with all men as far as it depends on you. So what I'm not advocating for the fact that we change our definition. The definition stands. And I do believe that a couple can get married against their family. It's still a valid wedding. But live at peace with, you do everything you can to live at peace with all men. And sometimes I do know a couple who's married and their whole family did turn against them. And that's not the worst thing in the world. Hey? They've got a church family.
Yeah. Another thing, brother, you must remember, we are in a fallen world. That one you must remember. This world is not perfect. And even we as Christians, you must know, we face different sufferings, different opposition, and so on. So if we find ourselves there, as we said, you follow the scriptures, you know now this is being sinful, and you've done all that you needed to do. At the end of the day, you must honor God and not honoring man. But I wanted to say, this
What
is
does
not
that,
only...
What does
no,
that
no.
look like?
Yeah, but I wanted to bring these aspects of, I think sometimes we deal with this as if it's only us, today's church, that are dealing with these issues that are not a clear cut, even on marriage. When you look at the marriages, even in the Bible, in the Old Testament, let's pick one example in the story of Ruth. Ruth getting married to Boaz. Now, there were steps that Boaz, even after he agreed that he can take Ruth, he said, no, but according to the culture, actually, there's somebody else who must marry you. I can only marry you if that person let that right go. You see, they also had to navigate through their sort of cultural system in order to do what we now look at as glorified thing that just is coming from that relationship. So God is also in control of these things. Sometimes we look at them and we're thinking, oh, it's unfortunate that these things are happening to us.
Yeah, I wanted. It might help because I had the similar point, right? So maybe this is where I might be off-ramping from the wisdom of the table. Providence is a doctrine that I hold to, and the Lord closes doors. So in my definition of honoring God, it doesn't jump to me to say I'm honoring the Lord, so therefore I'm going to marry this person. I'm not seeing that connection, that this is the person I'm to marry, because I might marry another person and we won't have these problems. So to me, it's not that binary. So that's why I'm struggling. So yes, I am running away from definitionally, simply because the answer might be hard. If I'm to be consistent, I do care about being consistent with my definition, and I'm wondering, why would honoring God only mean that I should just marry this person outside of my family's the other concern is providence. Alan mentioned earlier the whole thing of when we have seen, in some cases, when somebody is caused to be delayed, which is inconvenient, caused to be delayed by the family, that's actually been a mercy of the Lord, because we see something come out, and then things can go in different directions. He said, well, I love what he said, what Pastor Alan said. He said, now we actually need time. We actually need it now. But that wouldn't have come about, providential, that wouldn't have come about if we had not seen and come down and humbled ourselves under the providence of God, in God closing this door in the timeline that we wanted it to. So for me, I struggle then, like in my mind, there's providence here. There's providence here. There's the Lord is actually exposing things, and the Lord is doing things. And the fact that the Apostle Paul speaks the way he speaks about marriage in 1 Corinthians 7, regarding it as, you do it if you can, but if you don't have to, if you can manage yourself, of course, talking about situation and etc., that we can interpret that passage, we can go in different ways. But you understand, he's got that liberty that because of that, it's not instinctive for me to jump the more clear principles. I would argue, sorry, I need to be careful here. The principles that I would argue are clearer, which is honor your father and mother, and others like that, and especially when it comes to this issue of marriage, because of how loud that principle is so applied throughout the Bible. I would struggle to say let's just forge ahead in the life of discipleship. So I want to try and live acting as though I have not reached your 3 years, like that 3 years. I just want to exist. I just want to live that way because I don't know what I would do in your situation.
Yeah, and
it's a
I
hard
give grace to that,
situation.
but I do want to. The principle is, and we've seen even in the Bible where world cultures, in devotion to paganism, can give their children to be burnt at the fire. So when we talk about the darkness of generations, I think you say we live in a fallen world, but your fallenness seems to not affect the love for ancestors over love for weddings. Whereas I say sometimes fallenness does affect that. They love the ancestors more than that. It does.
It does.
Sometimes the darkness does express itself in that way.
It does.
So I'm just saying, principle-wise, hypothetically then, consistent to your principle, you would foresee a situation in a dark generation where Christians remain unmarried. Only pagans get married. Because to honor the parents would mean you dishonor God.
Christians
And you
have
are
had
not
children.
commanded.
Christians have had children, so the Christian children are getting married.
What?
I'm just saying, Christians have had children already in that situation, and so the Christian children are getting married because the Christian parents are not requiring that stuff. I'm just saying. You're confusing me.
Let me answer that, Brother Ati, like
Chris,
this, in terms
when you
of
say honor
authority.
God-
No, let me answer in terms of authority, because I'm hearing you saying now we may abandon the idea of these people getting married because now here is a culture it's saying they shouldn't be getting married. So we are back on the issues of authority. There's a level of authority that God is given. The parents honor your parents, as he said. But before that, there's a authority that is above that authority, of which the Bible says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, and your strength. So now, the parents, they also shouldn't be thinking their authority is the final weight. Now, there is the authority above them. Now, same applies to the state. There is an authority that is above them. So as Christians, we are operating on the level of the above authority, of which now that will be the word of God. That's where the tension is going to be, I think.
So would you say that in principle, in those circumstances, there would be a time where obeying God compared to parents means you bypass?
Right.
There is a time, but
There is a
we're not
time.
rushing to that. I get all of the wisdom.
You're not
And
right,
I want to, even in our closing after lunch, I want you to bring all of that to address the common situation, how you'd shepherd the people to go about, character, premarital, patience, honoring the parents' respect. Okay. All right. So I want that, but I'm just asking on a principle, you would foresee a time where obeying God means bypassing the unbiblical demands of the parents?
Yeah. If
You would
now
foresee a
they direct go against the word of
you would
God,
foresee a time,
then there
and you
we
would foresee a time, and you would foresee a time, as things stand, you wouldn't foresee even a time where that happens. You'd foresee a time where Christian people would remain unmarried in that society, with unbelievers getting married, in honoring the parents, and at least until providentially God changes the hearts of those unbelievers, even if it's not to Christ, but to make those exceptions, to make those concessions where you don't need to participate in this. But until that time, where God's providence does that, because you're not commanded to get married, you would foresee that Christian people remaining unmarried, principle-wise.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, you
the
say
thing
no,
is
but you
the
would.
thing is, you are, because the issue that I'm having with your question is that you are talking about a society-wide thing.
Yes, like intentionally so.
Intentionally.
And intentionally so, because of
so
cultures.
I'm struggling.
Yes.
I mean, you're putting me into a world that I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
And so I'm struggling because even in the worst of times, when Christianity has been you read church history, in the worst of times, Christians have been able to stand against this and actually get married. Like, I've never seen what you're describing in 2,000 years of church history. Like, wholesale.
You're not seeing cultures given to
I see cultures
such
given to
darkness,
I see cultures given to darkness.
sacrificing children, all of that
stuff,
paganism.
all of that exists, but all of that exists. But Christians, throughout the 2,000 years of Christian history, have been able to get married. Christians have been able to deal with persecution, and the gospel has continued. It feels like a hypothetical to me that is
Impossible.
It's so impossible. It's like the church will stand. The Lord is building His church. When the gospel comes, I'm struggling. Like I know you want a yes or no. Just so that I'm clear.
No, you can say it's impossible.
Rather, let me answer your question this way, because I know what you want.
No, you can say it's impossible, brother.
You want me to be consistent in my definition.
I would
Right.
appreciate that,
Yeah,
and
that's
I
what
don't
you
think
want.
that's unfair.
Yes, no, it's not unfair. I'm saying that's what you want.
Yeah.
Can we move aside from your hypothetical, because it's too?
Yeah.
I'm struggling with it.
Okay.
But let me answer what you want, which is the definition. Would I say that that these believers who have now they are faced with this issue, and of whether or not of an unbiblical requirement by their parents in order for them to get married, would I ever foresee a situation where I either say to them, budge forward, go forward without their approval, or not? Or would I say to them, separate? At this point in my development of the thinking of this issue, I would say, don't get married. Because definitionally for me, I see family as being important because of Genesis 2:24. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you.
Before maybe comes in, because I need to know how is it consistent then with the issues of authority, where now this family is going against what the scripture is saying.
No.
Can I quickly respond to that, and you can add, because I've been listening to you. You can say if I'm capturing well. I would suspect then the response would be, but you are not commanded to get married from the start. So to not get married is not disobedience.
Yes.
Separation is not disobedience.
So for me, First
that be
Corinthians
fair?
7, if anyone can accuse and say, you guys are saying don't get married, well, Paul said that in 1 Corinthians 7. In the same breath, later on, he says, these priests, talking about these people forbid marriage. Later on, he talks about in a different setting. So there is a place for that, for saying people forbidding marriage is sinful, and that's. But he's saying because of the present distress and the situation that I'm seeing, it's fine if you're all just like me and not getting married. So because there's that, even that, like if he didn't write 1 Corinthians 7, maybe I'd be a lot more nervous to say what I'm saying. But because he said that, I feel a bit more comfortable in saying that it could be a providential by the Lord closing the door. Since we are willing to accept that it's providence when we are able to see that actually the Lord was actually helping us in stopping you guys because there's actually problems, I think I should be also, like Job, I should also accept the other side of the providence, where the Lord actually is providentially saying, don't get married. Because I don't think that it's a right for everyone to get married. Like we say everybody should get married. And so then it's not the government, it's not the families then stopping you from doing something that God has commanded you to do.
Can I get the mic on him? But I want
Be-
to take
because
the hand
of
and then we'll just...
In 1 Corinthians 7, because of sexual morality, let everyone as his wife is direct. Okay, there's that issue the Bible is saying. There's an issue Paul addresses of people who are forbidding people to get married. In the last days, there will be people forbidding people to get married. So then the premise there is that that is wrong. People shouldn't be forbidding people to get married. So in that particular culture, they are now forbidding people to get married because of these stumbling blocks.
So now you're jumping. He's not saying culture, he's talking about false teachers.
Yes, I'm saying now we are dealing with it. Remember, a false teacher will come also through these cultures where he's forbidding people to get married. My argument is that now, why would you say, I'm not seeing the scripture being clear to say the Bible is rooting for people to get married, it's not saying people should not be getting married, if I'm making sense. So I'm seeing there's more verses who says people, they would rather get married than not to get married.
Maybe the thing from Chris that you can clarify, do you see marriage as a normative for society?
Yes.
And therefore when cultures are moving to make it not a normative in a wider scale, which is what I was asking, you wouldn't see that they are going against what actually should be a normative for society.
Yeah, okay, we're conflating a bunch of things now, we have to cut these things the fine line because I don't want to be misquoted here.
No,
Okay.
of course.
So can I just come back to this question?
Come back to of course.
Question, Chris. Yeah. So Chris, you're arguing in Timothy. Yeah, or Timothy, yeah, or was it Titus? But where he's saying they will be forbidding. I see that as it's a false teaching in the church, right? That he's dealing with there. Okay, so then that to me is quite clear. He himself in 1 Corinthians 7 is saying he's kind of giving freedom. These are matters of freedom, right? 1 Corinthians 7. It's a matter of freedom that if you can maintain yourself and manage yourself, don't get married. Are you with me? And he actually even says that he thinks that it's good if you don't, because of the current stress. Are you with me? So for me, that creates that freedom loophole. That it creates that. If it is a fundamental necessity at all times in all situations that Christians should be getting married, then Paul can't say what he's saying in 1 Corinthians 7. He can't be saying, if we're going to take it as there is a command from God that you should get married, then Paul can't say what he's saying. And so I don't take it that there's a command from God that we should all be getting married, precisely because Paul says what he says. And not only even that, the Lord Jesus himself in Matthew 19 says, hey, this word is for those who can handle it. Some were eunuchs, some were made eunuchs, some were born, and some for the sake of the kingdom of heaven have decided to become eunuchs. So because of that language, I feel free to say, you know what? I'm not sure that it is a dishonoring of God if providentially something comes and stops me from getting married. That's all I'm saying. Now, coming back to the ought, I don't want that. I want my young people to get married. I want babies here. Like, I want us to get married. Like, I want us, we're going to become Christian by evangelism and by procreation. You understand? Like, so, you understand what I'm trying to I'm trying to make these passages kind of communicate with each other and make sense. And where I'm worried about is the jump, the logical, I'm not seeing the logical jump from honoring God is, I need to now fight against this and get married. I'm struggling with that logical jump. So it's a struggle, but it's a struggle for me. I'm not saying that you can't make it work. Especially, I think in your system, brother, where your marriage it's two people, then your system is fine, right? In my system,
Alex says yes. That's not my problem.
yeah. In your system, you have no problems, but in mine, I have a problem.
Lelo,
I don't have a problem because it does not, the fact that you are given that responsibility does not mean you can abuse that of which the parents, they cannot abuse their, yes, they cannot abuse that authority that God, as much as husband cannot, as much as the state cannot abuse that authority that they are given.
You mentioned the biblical examples where
Yeah.
people abused it, and the patriarch in question had to
Yeah.
go through
Yeah.
that story. Even
Yeah.
though you and I would agree there was an abusing.
Right, there was an abusing. Yeah.
guys, when Lelo speaks and you don't have the mic,
And we're on the foreskin story, and in fact, in the foreskin story, it was actually, isn't it quite interesting that it was like one of the ways that the Lord actually magnified David, that he's actually able to do something like that. He was able. So I'm just saying it was providential, even though it was an abuse of power.
Lelo, just to, because I'm really listening, and I want you to confirm this. From your side, it seems like it would be a more clearer disobedience to dishonor parents and bypass them than to just remain single.
Yes.
That's what you are thinking.
what I'm saying.
When you say in clarity, because
Yeah.
it's a more clearer command to say obey your parents than to get married.
Yeah.
You see that as the clearer command is obey parents
because
more
remember-
than get married.
Remember,
is
because
a-
for
is a
me,
command.
the civil aspect of in the definition
Yeah.
of marriage comes as a construct of the family.
Yeah.
It comes as an extension of the family.
Yes. I'm
Right?
saying-
The family is the primary
family is the
in
primary.
Genesis 2:24, and even as the church, I don't feel I have the right to just jump in and do that,
Yeah.
because when criminals are there and the government is not putting criminals away, I don't build prisons as a church and say, let me take the criminals and put them in my church prison because I know what righteousness is, because the Bible says what righteousness is. The Bible does tell me what righteousness is. This person should be in prison, but the government is not doing it. I don't get involved.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I view
Yeah,
this.
that's why I'm saying.
But I'm being absolutist here, you understand? Like I'm meeting you in your absolutist, like definitional.
Yeah,
I think in practice we are way more together.
you are. You
Like
are.
we
As
are,
I've listened, you are.
we are way more together.
You
It's just
are.
now in trying to be consistent. Now
Yeah.
this is like a nerd.
No.
persuade him for the last
No. I would like. It's not.
But
a-
I wanted to persuade him from the scriptures again.
No,
Let me
no.
try to persuade him.
I want to allow. Lelo
Then
to
Michael
lead,
answers. Now, parents, according to Ephesians 6, they are not allowed to provoke their children to anger as much as the slaves. They are not allowed to abuse, the masters abusing their slaves. So I would put that in that category to say parents cannot now abuse that. And the Bible doesn't give them that a leeway that they can do that.
And that's fine. Let's take Mike and then we'll pause. Yeah. Because if I'm getting your point, is there's levels of authority, and the highest is obey God. Then under obey God, obey government, obey parents, obey husband, wife obeys. So it's a limited authority. This one under the only absolute one is the God one. I'm hearing you well, and I'm hearing you well. Just get Pastor Mike, and then we'll pause for a break, and I'll.
So this goes back to your question about the societal evilness, where you have a society that's so evil that it won't allow it. And I'm not there, but I've got friends who are missionaries in Congo. And right now what's happening in Congo is that the government will not recognize a marriage unless both parents, both families sign to accept the marriage. But what's happening in these Christian homes or Christian churches is that the parents won't. They're making these unreasonable amounts, and the church can't just step in legally and say, go around it. Okay, so all I'm trying to say, I'm not trying to justify one way or the other. I'm just saying, yeah, there are instances in which that situation. They're debating that as a group of missionaries right now. I mean, just literally the last couple of weeks. What do we do?
Yeah,
All right.
and that's all my point was, that sometimes societies can get dark, and sometimes it can affect marriage. But we'll take a break, and then we'll come back after lunch just with closing statements. We'll allow Lelo to depart. Let's come back, brothers. I think just a message from Lelo that pastorally he agrees with all that has been said, and would even add that prayer, patience are key. Honoring parents are key, even going forward, even as pastors, as we seek to counsel our members. But what I like at this time, brothers, because of also of time, just to give you 5 minutes each. At least there's 3 of you now, 2 are gone, so it's going to be less time. Just to give some concluding pastoral counsel on this. But I will still want you to touch on at least 2 things, even there, somewhere along the line. One is, what are some of the points that were discussed here that have sort of made you rethink your position as well, that were just fresh in terms of perspective, even if it did not make you change your position. I'm just saying that made you rethink how you've been thinking about this. Some points that you think this was a unique perspective that I had not considered, even if it's not, you've not changed anything, but yeah, that touching on that, just as a sort of feedback on the discussion itself. And 2, just advice on, at least currently, pastorally, a safe middle ground, if I can call it a middle ground, but a safe approach as we were discussing. I think you were all eager to give the pastoral. I want that now, that pastoral. What should couples prioritize in these things as they go about seeking to get married? What are some of the things they should prioritize, maybe to even avoid some of the dangers I was pointing out, just to guide potential couples which are considering marriage soon? Can I start with you, Pastor Mike, and move all the way to Chris?
So I don't think I'll take 5 minutes, but so we'll keep it short. A couple things for me. First of all, it's extremely helpful to hear the African men speaking, because I'm obviously a foreigner. Okay, I come from a Western culture, and I was, kind of somewhat joking about it before, but to me, it's just like, go get married, forget it, just forget those guys, And then I gave the illustration of Futi in the airport. So it helps me to hear from Chris, from Lelo, from Sipo, from you, because you do have a better grasp on the culture than I do. No matter how long I'm here, I won't ever grasp the culture like you guys do. And so just hearing those things, I think, were helpful. I think that the whole discussion on the authority issue or the institution was I hadn't thought it through that way before, so that was extremely helpful to me, and to think about it from the standpoint of the, who is the authority here in this situation, who is instituting the marriage. So that was very helpful to me. As far as the pastoral concepts are concerned, pretty much I think we've expressed them, but one thing Alan and I were talking about right during lunch is, there is a distinction between obeying your parents and honoring your parents. And as adults, honoring your parents doesn't mean you do what they necessarily say. And so that may be a little bit of a pushback on some of the discussion that was held. So yeah, and I think this is a good forum. I think we should do it again. The other thing I would recommend is expanding it, because I would love to discuss the issue of divorce and remarriage in this setting. I think we would, at least my position would be that marriage is for life except for fornication or abandonment. But what constitutes abandonment? Okay, does a situation where a guy is a bum and not supporting his family and just living off his wife's income, is that abandonment, even though he's at home? Those kinds of questions I think would be good to discuss. So anyway.
I appreciate that, and actually, as we will continue, there was also going to be some questions on the consistency now applying to divorce. If we had more time, where I was going to bring it to you guys to say, if you affirm this institution to recognize, then equally so to be consistent even in divorce, until this institution is you are divorced, you are not divorced, which was going to be interesting, and also remarriage as well, because these are also things we face in our churches. So I appreciate that you raised that up, and hopefully the organizers are listening as well. Hopefully they can gather this again to delve into these issues, because we face them, and sometimes you don't know as a pastor what's the way that pleases God the most. So I appreciate that.
All right, so a couple of minutes. I wrote down some notes here. And rethinking. I was grateful as we discussed all of these things that I was standing in the right place in the beginning. You know, it's helpful to hear all of the opposing views and you say, yeah, well, I don't have that problem. You know, it's not an issue, you know. Yeah, you're right. You know, it's like the Arminian and the Calvinist both debating about why did God make people who would not be saved? You know, that's everybody's problem, you know. It's not our problem uniquely. Anyway, I think a couple of things I would say. The first is the definition between validity and definition. You know, so when we're talking about marriage as a covenant of companionship, many people go into a marriage. You know, there's been a long debate about is an African cultural wedding a valid marriage? You know, does God consider that marriage? And I think we've moved on from that debate. That was a sort of a debate from the past. But the answer to that question is that in an African cultural wedding, people do enter into a valid marriage. And the church should recognize that. We shouldn't have to have a wide wedding. We should steer away from that logic. But the challenge that I face is often with an African cultural wedding, the couple never gets stopped to ask if they understand what this is. We were talking about initiation and, you know, the men teaching husbands what marriage is and the women teaching the girls what marriage is. But does this couple understand what they're committing to specifically? So it's not in my mind, it's not an issue of validity. Is it a valid marriage? It's, you know, do you even know what this is that you're getting into? That's the important thing that I try and chase in premarital counseling. So I want them to enter into a marriage that's valid and it has a specific definition in their minds. This is what we're committing to. And that's, in my mind, that's according to my definition of marriage as well, is that determines the moment of marriage. You know, the moment of marriage is when a couple, they agree with each other in the presence of God that I will love you in this way, I will love you in this way for the rest of our lives. So, and then the second point is the issue of chronology. We already spoke about it. And I do think that if we're going to serve this purpose, if we're going to identify the moment of marriage, and we're going to see the moment of marriage as the moment when a couple agrees, they enter into that covenant with each other in the presence of God, of course, with their families, you know, present and with their blessing and all of that, preferably. The chronology has to begin with the pastor in the church. You know, we have to have these people. We've already said that. But then on top of that, if there's never been, let's say the pastor does premarital counseling, the couple never gets to say, this is what I'm committing to, and they go through the lobola process, and at the end of the lobola, if they're there or not, you have the big celebration, considers them married or, you know, in a framework instead of an agreement like you were describing. And then after that cultural wedding celebration, then the couple still hasn't had the opportunity to say, this is what I'm committing to. The church could do that, what we were describing as saying after a service, we can have you stand in front of the people and say, we got married here, we celebrated, lobola's paid according to the agreement, you know, or partly paid according to the agreement, and the church can celebrate that. It's a kind thing for them to do for the church, and also for, you know, for them to enjoy getting rid of gossip and slander and all of that kind of thing. And if they do really want to do a wide wedding, many want to do it for that reason, for clarity and all of that. I think they could do that. But we just like the fact that the church can be involved at that level. And then the final thing is the concept of the de-emphasis of the couple and the emphasis of the families joining. And for me, that that really de-emphasizes the covenant of companionship. So when couples come into marriage and they overemphasize the joining of families, then the agreement of the couple gets sort of fuzzed out. And then when there's trouble in the future in their marriage, I didn't agree to that. I didn't agree to that. I didn't agree to submit to you. Or, I didn't agree to love you in a servant-hearted way. So it helps if they don't have a moment where they're telling their community and each other what they are doing, then nobody even knows what they're committing to. So I think the concept of families being united, I did a lot of research into that and found huge contrast between the African cultural marriage and cultural weddings in the Bible. I thought, oh, wow, these are very different, even though we like to say they're the same. So I would say that we as a church need to emphasize the couple so that they are not disadvantaged in their wedding and they're not held accountable by their community to a specific thing. And that'll be a real blessing if we can see marriages emphasizing those things. Thanks, man. I don't know if there was 5 minutes, but...
No, it was less. And before you give it to Chris, then the value of premarital, and maybe even Mike can come just before I give it to Chris, you would advise people to really, really consider, especially believers, talking Christian now in your church, the value of premarital before anything. Would you speak on that?
Yeah, absolutely. We have it's a requirement in our church. I will not marry someone who has not gone through Dr. Max Preparing for Marriage God's Way. We had a couple just now that wanted to push it forward, and I said no. I said, well, he said, you're welcome to go to Home Affairs and get married, but I will not be part of it. And the guys that have gone through it just recently, they will laud it. I mean, there's weaknesses in it because it's very westernized, and so there's especially one chapter that I think needs to be rewritten. Alan and I've already talked about this in an African context, but the material is extremely helpful. It makes people think, and because what happens is you assume that I'm compatible. I never had an argument with this girl. And actually, I almost to the point of, if you haven't had an argument, I'm not going to marry you, because you need to argue. You need to figure out how the other person's going to argue when you actually get into a marriage situation. So I think it's extremely helpful.
Just to add.
Yeah, absolutely. I love premarital, and I've just finished writing a draft of a new premarital counseling manual. I took Wayne Mack's book, and everybody in our church, whatever material they used, I took it and I combined everything, to make sure we don't miss something. And then I put in a whole lot of the common issues that we deal with here in an African context. And there's a long case study, very similar to what you were saying. There's where Baba Kumalo doesn't want to, his son, this guy, to marry his daughter, because he can't afford huge lobola. So it deals with that very thing. It's quite weird that we spoke about that today. So I'm big on premarital. I see a lot of good things come out of it.
Would you be willing to share that document that you are?
Yeah, I'll publish it soon, and it'll be available for anybody, real cheap.
Because as you give Chris, Chris, you can take the mic. It's part of your considerations as well that we should be writing some of these things, even to unify, so that when my member goes to Living Hope, he's not getting something drastically opposite and is now hanging and so that type of writing, maybe you can speak to that as you conclude as well, to add on that, because you are big on that.
Sure. Yeah, maybe starting with the value of the premarital counseling. Also in our church, we don't conduct whatever your wedding if you refuse to go through premarital counseling, and we have found it to be helpful for the couples when they face problems. They know we dealt with these things. That's one. But also they find it easy to phone you, to talk to you, because you've already discussed those things. You are not a stranger. They're no longer hiding things from you. So we do a review, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. In that review, we are able to ask you to say, how are you doing on companionship? How are you doing on children issues? How are you doing on issues of in-laws and so on. And as they talk, you start seeing now they are dealing with real problems, real issues, and they seek wisdom. So that is helpful. So yeah, back on what we've been discussing, I still holding on to the position of the parents. I consider marriage as a common grace that God has given everyone, whether you're a Christian or you are not. And God has given the level also of common grace to different institutions, as much as He gives the families, the church, but also the state. Those are the level of grace and that God is giving those institutions to run His world. Yes, the world is still fallen, but we still have those institutions in place. However, I was, I think, challenged on a number of things, more so on the issue of, in African context, there's this issue of children they are not growing. They remain children forever. I think that's where his view comes in. When are they considered adult and matured that they can make, yes, where they can make their own decisions? When to, because parents always say, we are parents, we are elders. When to children in an African context, where they grow, where they are considered adults. They are adults, they can make their own decisions, they can differ with their parents. And that does not necessarily mean they don't honor them because they are differing on the way they do things. Even if it's not scriptural things, there's a lot of things that you differ with your parents on. I mean, they may want you to take this girl, you don't want that girl. When do we come to that point to say, no, you have a right to make your own decision? I think that was well put, and I find that one interesting. Yeah, but lastly, I think as a church, more especially the young generation, we need to write more on these things. We need to engage on these things, but also produce some articles on it, some books on it, so that other generations will come, or other brothers, and read what we are saying. Because I've got all kinds of thinking about marriage, where to start, and so on and so forth, but it's not written down. And all the pastors, they know, but they didn't write anything down. There's no document you can take and read, you know, and say, I'm basing my convictions based on so and so and so and so's writings. So I think there's that need to start putting these thoughts down and writing more, and come up with documents as well. I mean, we discuss these things on marriage, but what is the church saying? I mean, I think if one of the things that was clear today is that, did the church thought through these things? Or we are just officiating and we are pronouncing? Did we thought through these things and say, this is our steps? If somebody take us to court, can we produce a clear document to say, this is our steps of dealing with this issue? Even this is where the provision of the government is being followed. So yeah, I saw that there's a need for us as pastors to be accountable for even our counseling, because we sit and we give young people a counseling, but is it refined by the other brothers? I mean, is it something, is a document that you can borrow from me, I can borrow from you and say, as these churches, as Bible churches, whatever, or these days churches, this is the document we're subscribing to. This is how we're going to do things. I think there's a great need for those.
Just in 1 minute, the last one, because I've suppressed you brothers on this issue for long, so I want to do the opposite now. A couple facing some of these difficulties with an unreasonable family of the bride, just some counsel in 1 minute of just some of the things that the couple can do, and also to counsel even the church behind this couple. How should they approach this? Now, we're talking on the ought now. I'm not challenging on definition I'm just saying, as the couple is facing a difficult family that wants some of the things that are unreasonable, just some counsel for that couple.
Yeah, we thank God we have 3 of our couples are married, where we were doing lobola negotiations and so on. At some point, it was looking like impossible, right? But over time we've realized sometimes it was a misunderstanding from the delegates and the family. I think it was clear when we were visiting those families that what they are expecting and what we are proposing it's clashing. And you realize that these problems also were caused by those expectations. I think we may need to help also our young people to communicate better with their families, more especially when we go on Lobola. What is their expectations? If they want to finish everything in 2 months, they must communicate that to say, we are requesting to get married to these people, they will bring this amount on this day. Because it clashes where the families feel like everything now. You know, you pay Lobola today, you are telling us next week you are getting married. Yeah, I think our young people, they need to iron out those issues that are not clear so that the delegates, actually my preference will be, they may need to try that the families meet first, even before the delegates. There were situations where the father and the mother go and meet with them and say, want to know you before we send the delegates. And in those meetings begin to negotiate some of these things. That's what I would say on that.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I think not to repeat what Chris has been saying, one of the challenges that I've faced in premarital counseling and then especially early marriage is that, it sounds weird, but a man doesn't really know what a woman is until he marries her. And a woman doesn't really know what a man is until she marries her, until she marries him. And it's helpful for to find out why it is that couples are so anxious to get married. And a lot of, just basically, men desire their wife physically, and a woman desires to be in a place where she's safe and her needs are met, and she can be taken care of. And it's very possible that neither of them are going to get what they're expecting, like you were saying with expectations. And I think that in that time, if they can't get married immediately, those are always good things to discuss. What is it that's making you so anxious? If you're getting angry, what's behind the anger? If a woman's getting weepy and she's giving up, why is it that she's, what are the heart issues behind all of those things? So I really find that a huge and beautiful opportunity. But I would, like we agreed in the conversation earlier, I genuinely do think there are times when a couple can go ahead and get married against the blessing of their family. And it will very seldom be the entire family that they're against, might be one or two members. And even after that, those people could come around after that process. They don't even need to be won over immediately. I was just telling Mike that when I got married, my father-in-law was a homosexual. And he brought his boyfriend, him and his boyfriend were at my wedding, and he had a lot to do with it. He paid for a lot of it, and he was at the reception, and they were doing what gay couples do. And, so he never liked me. Even the night he committed suicide, eventually, and the night before he killed himself, he phoned me, he was drunk, and he said, whatever happens now is your fault. And then he went outside and killed himself, gassed himself in his car. Of course I don't bear guilt for that, because I went out of my way to care for him and love him and share the gospel with him, and it just made him more and more angry. But the point is that I did get married to a girl whose dad didn't like me. And, he was still there. He still paid, but he wasn't very happy, So I do think there are times when you can get married apart from family blessing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think kind of taking off what Alan said, I think that teach the couple, what's God teaching here? What does God want you to learn from this situation? I think a good theology of suffering, what's God's purpose in this situation? Bridges' book on trusting God, recognize God is good, God is sovereign. What are you supposed to learn from this? How do you trust Him? That's what God wants from us. He wants us to glorify God. So how can I glorify God through this situation? What do I need to do that will bring glory to the God?
I appreciate that. It's one of the guys who've been with us since we started the session. Just their takeaway from this event. Oh yeah. So I'm going to ask just one member briefly from the audience just to give a recap on what they found helpful, because they were with us during this time. It's one of the organizers. Just some feedback from them, and then we'll close.
Okay, thank you. One thing that really stood out for me is the importance of the involvement of family. So I think in this generation, we tend to think, or we tend to view family as enemies when it comes to marriage. It's like, okay, we are now going to face this family, so please, pastors, prepare me for that, because I know that my dad is a difficult person and all of that. But through this discussion, it has been made clear that that is not the case. We should approach them the way that is honoring to God. Even we should honor them, and honoring them means we are also honoring God, because He's the one who commanded people to honor their parents. So I think that is one of the important things that I've received this afternoon, that it is important for families to just be involved in the entire process. They are not enemies, even on issues that we might think we differ with them. We should not approach it as if they are hostile. They don't want this marriage to continue, but we must understand that we can have some differences, but we should still respect them, and we should still allow the process to continue without us seeing them as enemies. So yeah, I think that is important, especially for many young people, that when they are approaching marriage, they shouldn't really think of parents as that one hindrance that they have to overcome, but as part of the entire process. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Before I pray, just to extend some gratitude, I think first and foremost to our panelists, to take a Saturday. I know all of you are pastors and elders and are preaching tomorrow, so we really appreciate the time. Some of you, we only told you short notice, maybe 2-3 weeks before, whereas the organizers have been planning since last year. But we still appreciate that you still made the effort to come. We really appreciate the insights, the diversity. I think, Alan, you've introduced a fourth perspective that no one anticipated, that, actually this institution is secondary. So I appreciate that. That's what we wanted. We wanted this thing to be opened up. So that's what I hope the audience at home heard, to say, there's more to this. There's more to this, and we should be doing more. We should not just be moving with the train as it was. As Chris, I think, was saying, you're talking about writing. Maybe once you're done, we can share that. We can share it with the group as well. Right, even particularly from an African perspective, as Pastor Mike was saying, that there's this side that he appreciates where it's now from an African perspective. So I appreciate your wisdom, brothers, and your time and your effort and your love and your honoring us as the organizer. I appreciate the organizers themselves for One Day Biblical Conference. These guys have been working tirelessly. Discussion started after that conference last year, and they've just been working tirelessly to do everything. The guys who are helping us with the sound, we appreciate that, brothers. And everyone who just had a hand, the sisters who served us wonderful, delicious food. When I went back, the guys have already destroyed the meat. But yeah, who served us wonderful food. We appreciate them as well. And also Lelo and Heritage and the elders of Heritage for hosting us and allowing us to spend this wonderful time here. It's definitely not the end, it's the beginning. It's our first time hosting this type of discussion, even as an organization. So we expect that it won't be perfect, but it's a start, and that's what we're grateful for. It starts the conversation, and it makes us all to think. So we are grateful. Above all, we're grateful to God. Let me pray in gratitude to Him. Father, thank you for this time, and thank you, Lord, for giving us such a grace to discuss these matters, Lord. Indeed, they are at our doorsteps, Lord. These are not far distant issues. These are not just hypothetical issues. They affect us and affect the body and affect the testimony of the gospel at times, Lord, and affect believers. And we pray, oh Father, that you may give us wisdom. Give us wisdom to follow your will in these things, to please you, to honor you. That is our greatest desire, Lord, besides culture and whatnot. We want to honor you. Even our attempt to honor parents, because we want to honor you. You are our greatest desire, Lord. And did we say with us, of whom do we have in heaven but you? There's nothing on earth we desire besides you. Our heart and flesh may fail, but you are the strength of our heart and our portion forever. It is in you that we trust, and in you that we ask that, Lord, that you bless this discussion, bless those who will hear this, bless the conversation that will come, and bless efforts, Lord, that will come to unify our understanding in these things. Bless even the wisdom you will give brothers to write about these things, to help the church and the next generation. All of this we pray, seeking that Christ and Christ alone may be glorified in the church. In the name of Jesus Christ we do pray. Amen.